The first time Eliza Thorne truly understood loneliness, she was standing in front of 19 ranch children who couldn't spell their own names, watching through a frosted window as the last wagon train of autumn disappeared over the horizon. That was 7 years ago. Now, at 34, she had stopped counting the wagons, stopped counting the years, stopped counting anything except the weeks until winter would lock Cold Creek Basin inside its frozen fist for another 6 months. Miss Thorne, Tommy's eating paste again." Eliza turned from the window. Tommy Wardell, gap-toothed and grinning, had white library paste smeared across his upper lip like a mustache. The other children were laughing. Some things never changed, even when everything else did. "Tommy, how many times? But it tastes like peppermint." "It tastes like flour and water because that's what it is." Eliza crossed the schoolhouse in 4 strides, confiscating the jar. "If you're hungry, I've got cornbread in my desk. Real food, the kind that won't make you sick." Tommy's face fell. "I wasn't hungry, miss. It's something to do." Something to do. That was the frontier in 3 words. Vast stretches of nothing interrupted by brief moments of everything, usually everything terrible. The Cold Creek Basin schoolhouse was a single room with walls so thin you could hear the wind preparing its arguments hours before it arrived. Eliza had taught here since she was 27, back when she still believed teaching was temporary, back when she thought some rancher's son might notice her at a dance, or some merchant passing through might see something worth staying for. But 7 years was a long time to wait for something that wasn't coming. All right, everyone. McGuffey readers, page 47. I want to hear Rebecca, Samuel, and Margaret read aloud. The rest of you practice your sums. The children shuffled into position. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. Not the pretty kind that melted by noon, but the serious kind that meant business. October snow. The kind that whispered, "Get ready," in a voice that made your bones ache. Eliza had $18 saved. Maybe 20 if she skipped buying lamp oil and went to bed when the sun set. It wasn't enough to leave. Wasn't enough to stay comfortable. It was just enough to keep pretending she had choices. "Miss Thorne," Rebecca Sutton's voice was small. "Is it true what Mama said? That you're going to have to leave before Christmas?" The room went silent. 19 pairs of eyes swiveled toward Eliza. She kept her face perfectly still. "What did your mama say exactly?" "That Mr. Donovan's raising the rent on your boarding room, that you can't afford it anymore, that you'll probably have to go back east to live with relatives or something. Or something, the polite way of saying become someone's unpaid housemaid in exchange for a roof over your head. My plans are my own business, Rebecca. Now read, please." But the damage was done. The children knew, which meant their parents knew, which meant the whole settlement had been discussing Eliza's future over breakfast tables and in general stores while she'd been pretending everything was fine. The reading lesson dragged. When the children finally scattered into the early afternoon cold, Eliza sat at her desk and put her head in her hands. She'd come west with her parents during the railroad boom, full of optimism and adventure. But fever took her mother the first winter. A logging accident took her father the second. At 26, Eliza had been alone in a territory that ground solitary women into dust. Teaching had been her salvation. But teaching paid $17 a month and room and board cost $15. That left $2 for everything else: food, clothing, firewood, medicine, hope. She'd made it work through sheer stubbornness. But Mr. Donovan was a businessman, not a charity. And with 2 new families arriving from Kansas, he could rent that room for $25 to someone with an actual future. Eliza stood, wrapping her shawl tighter. She needed to walk, needed to think, needed to... The door opened. She turned, expecting a forgotten primer or a child retrieving mittens. Instead, she found Garrick Hale. He filled the doorway like a storm front fills the sky. Inevitable, imposing, impossible to ignore. 6.5 feet of raw frontier bone and muscle, wearing a cattleman's coat that had seen harder winters than Eliza could imagine. His face was weathered granite, all sharp angles and old scars. Gray touched his temples despite him being maybe 40. His eyes were the color of creek water in shadow. Men in Cold Creek Basin fell into 2 categories: those who worked for Garrick Hale and those who wished they did. His ranch was the largest in the territory, his cattle herds legendary, his reputation somewhere between myth and monster. Eliza had seen him exactly 3 times in 7 years. Once at a town meeting about the schoolhouse budget, he'd voted to increase her salary and said nothing else. Once at the general store, where he'd tipped his hat and moved past her like wind around a fence post. And once at a funeral for a ranch hand killed in a stamped, where he'd stood alone at the grave long after everyone else left. He never came to town unless necessary. He never spoke unless he had something worth saying, and he absolutely never entered her schoolhouse. Until now. "Mr. Hale," Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Is there something I can help you with?" He removed his hat. Snow dusted his shoulders. For a long moment, he just looked at her, not unkindly, but with the intense focus of a man examining livestock at auction. "Heard you're losing your boarding room," he said finally. His voice was deep, rough-edged. Not cruel, but not warm either. Practical. News travels fast in small towns. News travels fast when people enjoy bad fortune that isn't theirs. He turned the hat in his hands. Large hands, scarred knuckles, nails clean despite ranch work. "I have a proposition." Eliza's stomach tightened. She'd heard stories about desperate women accepting propositions from wealthy men. None of those stories ended well. "I'm not interested in—" "Marriage," Garrick interrupted. "A legal marriage. Contract-based. Practical arrangement between 2 adults who understand exactly what they're getting." The world tilted slightly. "Excuse me? I need a wife. You need security. The frontier doesn't care about romance, it cares about survival." He met her eyes directly. "No shame, no romance, no pretty lies. I'm offering you a home, protection, and a legal partnership. In exchange, you'd manage the household, continue teaching if you want, and help me navigate the social obligations I'm terrible at." Eliza couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was hearing. "I don't understand," she finally managed. "You could marry anyone. Why me?" "Because you're the only woman in this territory who's survived 7 winters alone without compromising who you are. That takes strength most men don't have." He paused. "And because I don't want someone who'll expect things I can't give. Romance, poetry, whatever people think marriage should be. I want someone practical who understands this is about building something functional, not chasing fairy tales." It should have been insulting, should have been degrading, should have sent her running, but instead Eliza heard something else beneath his words. Honesty, the rarest commodity on the frontier. "I need time to think." "You don't have time. Donovan's renting your room November 1st. That's 8 days. Garrick placed a folded document on her desk. "Contract's there. Terms are fair. Read it. Think about it. But understand something, Miss Thorne. Winter's coming whether you're ready or not. And this territory doesn't give second chances to people who wait too long." He settled his hat back on his head, nodded once, and walked out. Eliza stood frozen for a full minute after he left. Then she grabbed the document with shaking hands. The contract was 3 pages, written in clear, precise handwriting. Legal language mixed with blunt frontier practicality. Separate bedrooms unless mutually agreed otherwise. Equal partnership in all household decisions. Monthly allowance of $50 for personal expenses. Right to continue teaching or pursue other employment. Property division terms clearly outlined in case of dissolution. At the bottom, space for 2 signatures, $50 a month. That was almost 3 times what she made teaching. It was security, safety, a future that didn't involve slowly starving in a boarding room or becoming some distant cousin's servant. But it was also marriage to a man she barely knew. A man the entire territory either feared or respected, usually both. A man who'd just offered her a business contract where most men offered flowers and promises. Eliza folded the document carefully and slipped it inside her coat. She taught the afternoon session in a daze, corrected arithmetic with half her attention, dismissed the children early when snow began falling harder. That evening, she sat in her tiny boarding room, 8 feet by 10, with a bed, a chair, and a washstand, and read the contract 17 times. What kind of man proposes marriage like a business merger? What kind of woman considers accepting? The desperate kind, the practical kind, the kind who'd learned that survival mattered more than pride. She thought about her mother's grave, marked with a simple wooden cross that had probably rotted to splinters by now. She thought about her father's last words. "This country takes everything eventually. Don't let it take you." At midnight, Eliza lit her last candle, dipped her pen in ink, and signed her name. Meg. The wedding happened 4 days later in the Cold Creek Basin courthouse, witnessed by a judge who looked perpetually drunk and a clerk who looked perpetually bored. Garrick wore the same cattleman's coat he'd worn to the schoolhouse. Eliza wore her best dress, dark green wool, mended at the cuffs, 5 years old. No flowers. No music. No pretense that this was anything except a legal transaction between two people who understood reality better than romance. Do you, Garrick Matthew Hale, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Eliza Margaret Thorne, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband? Eliza looked at the stranger beside her. His face revealed nothing, no warmth, no coldness, just focus. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the Colorado Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Sign here. They signed. The judge filed the paperwork. The clerk yawned. And just like that, Eliza Thorne became Eliza Hale. Outside, snow was falling in earnest. Garrick had brought a wagon with a canvas cover and wool blankets piled in the back. It's a 3-hour ride to the ranch, he said, helping her up. His hand was warm, steady. We'll stop halfway if you need to rest. I'll be fine. They rode in silence. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, rolling prairie broken by occasional clusters of pine and cottonwood. The sky was the color of old bruises. Wind carried the smell of coming storms. Eliza had lived in Cold Creek Basin for 7 years but had never ventured more than 5 miles from town. Now she was heading into genuine wilderness with a man who was legally her husband but practically a stranger. You're scared, Garrick said after an hour. Not a question, an observation. Wouldn't you be? Probably, but I'm not good at scared. Usually just comes out as angry or silent. He glanced at her. You can still back out. I'll take you back to town. Give you money to get east. No hard feelings. Is that what you want? I want you to choose this clearly, not because you're trapped, but because you've weighed everything and decided it's the best option available. He paused. I don't need a wife who resents me. Rather be alone than that. Honesty again. The man seemed incapable of pretty lies. I signed the contract because it was the best option, Eliza said carefully. But I don't know you. I don't know what kind of man you really are when there's no witnesses and no consequences. That's fair. Garrick's jaw tightened. I've done things I'm not proud of, hurt people who deserved it, and some who didn't. I'm not easy to live with. I work from dawn until I can't see straight, and I don't tolerate laziness or dishonesty. But I've never hit a woman, never forced myself on anyone, and I keep my word even when it costs me. He met her eyes. You'll be safe at my ranch. Might not be happy, but you'll be safe. That's the best promise I can make. Something loosened in Eliza's chest. Not trust exactly, but the beginning of it. They rode on. The Hale Ranch appeared as the sun was setting. A sprawling collection of buildings clustered against the base of a pine-covered ridge. Main house, barn, bunkhouse, storage sheds, corrals. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Cattle dotted distant pastures like dark stones. It was bigger than Eliza had imagined, more established, more permanent. This wasn't some struggling homestead held together with hope and wire. This was an empire carved out of wilderness through blood and stubbornness. Garrick pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the main house. It was 2 stories, built from local timber and stone, with a wide porch and shuttered windows. Solid. Built to last. 4 bedrooms upstairs, he said, climbing down. You can take whichever one you want except the corner room. That's mine. Kitchen, parlor, and dining room downstairs. There's a library, though I use the term loosely. Books I inherited from my father mostly. You're welcome to them. A library? Eliza hadn't expected that. Garrick helped her down from the wagon. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary on her waist, then released quickly, as if he'd caught himself doing something inappropriate. I've got 6 men working full-time, 3 more seasonal. They're decent enough, but they're ranch hands, not gentlemen. If any of them bother you, tell me immediately. I can handle rough language, Mr. Hale. Garrick, if we're married, you should probably use my name. Garrick, then. It felt strange in her mouth, intimate in a way the ceremony hadn't been. He grabbed her single trunk, everything she owned fit inside, and carried it toward the house. The interior was cleaner than Eliza expected. Sparse, masculine, functional. Wooden floors, simple furniture, a massive stone fireplace dominating the main room. No curtains, no decorations, nothing soft or welcoming. It looked like exactly what it was, a house where a solitary man existed without actually living. I hired a woman from town to come twice a week for cleaning and laundry, Garrick said, setting her trunk down. Mrs. Chen, she's been asking when I'd finally marry so she'd have help managing this place. She'll probably cry when she meets you. You make it sound like I'm rescuing you. Maybe you are. He looked around the stark room. This house has been dead for 10 years. Maybe you'll bring some life back into it. Before Eliza could respond, the front door burst open and a compact Chinese woman in her 50s rushed in, speaking rapid Cantonese mixed with English. Mr. Hale, you didn't tell me. I would have prepared. The upstairs isn't ready. Oh! She stopped, spotting Eliza. Her face transformed from panic to joy. You married! You actually married! Mrs. Chen, this is my wife, Eliza. Eliza, Mrs. Chen manages to keep this place from falling apart despite my best efforts to destroy it. Mrs. Chen grabbed both of Eliza's hands. Welcome, welcome! Finally, this house has a woman, a wife. Oh, we'll fix everything. Make it proper. Make it a home, yes? Her enthusiasm was overwhelming and oddly touching. Eliza found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. I'd like that. Good, good. You rest tonight. Tomorrow we start fresh. I'll make dumplings. Mr. Hale loves dumplings, but never asks. Now I have excuse. She bustled toward the kitchen, muttering happily in Cantonese. Garrick watched her go with something approaching affection. She's been threatening to quit for 5 years because I'm hopeless at normal human interaction. You just gave her a reason to stay. I think I like her. Everyone does. She's the kindest person in this territory, which is probably why she ended up here. Everywhere else was too cruel. He gestured toward the stairs. Pick your room. I'll bring up your trunk. Tomorrow I'll show you the ranch properly. Tonight, just settle in. Eliza climbed the stairs, testing each step. The wood was solid. No creaks, no weakness. Everything about this house spoke of careful construction by someone who understood how to build things that lasted. 4 bedrooms, he'd said. She opened the first door, empty except for dust. Second door, storage, filled with old furniture covered in sheets. Third door, the corner room. She shouldn't look, but curiosity won. It was stark as a monk's cell. Single bed, neatly made, washstand, trunk. Window overlooking the corrals, nothing personal except a daguerreotype on the nightstand. A stern-faced couple, probably his parents. The 4th bedroom was across the hall, smaller than his, but with a better window facing east. Morning light. She liked that. This one, she called down. Garrick appeared moments later with her trunk. He set it down carefully, then stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he was allowed inside. Mrs. Chen will bring bedding, and there's... He stopped, started again. There's a lock on the door, inside lock, I mean, so you can, lock him out. He was telling her she could lock him out. Thank you, Eliza said quietly. He nodded once and disappeared. That first night, Eliza lay in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar house married to an unfamiliar man and listened to the frontier wind testing the walls like it tested everything. Downstairs, she could hear Garrick moving around, the sound of a fire being banked, footsteps, a door closing. She'd done it, actually done it, married a stranger for practical reasons and moved into the wilderness where no one would hear her scream if things went wrong. But instead of fear, she felt something else. Possibility. For 7 years, her life had been shrinking. Smaller room, smaller future, smaller hope. Now suddenly it had expanded. Room to breathe, room to think, room to imagine something beyond mere survival. It might not last. Garrick might turn cruel. She might hate ranch life. Winter might kill them both. But tonight, in this moment, Eliza Hale, was warm, fed, and safe. It wasn't love, it wasn't romance, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. And sometimes, more was enough. She fell asleep to the sound of wind and cattle and her own slow breathing, not knowing that in a neighboring valley, a man named Silas Mercer was already planning how to destroy everything Garrick Hale had built. not knowing that the practical marriage she'd entered would soon be tested by threats she couldn't imagine, not knowing that before spring arrived, she'd throw a brass bell through a blizzard of bullets to save the life of a man she'd married for all the wrong reasons, but was beginning to love for all the right ones. Morning arrived with shocking clarity, brilliant sun on snow, air so cold it hurt to breathe, and the sound of cattle moving past the house. Eliza woke disoriented. Wrong ceiling, wrong walls, wrong everything. Then memory returned. Marriage, ranch, new life. She dressed quickly in the frigid room, choosing her warmest skirt and a wool jacket. Downstairs, Mrs. Chen was already cooking, filling the house with scents that made Eliza's stomach growl. "Good morning. You sleep well?" "Of course not. First night is always strange. Sit, sit. I make breakfast." "Where's Garrick?" "Mr. Hale?" "Out 2 hours already. Always working, that man. Works like the devil is chasing him." Mrs. Chen set down a plate of eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. "Eats like he's afraid food will disappear." "You teach him to slow down, yes?" "I'm not sure he's the type to slow down. Everyone slows down eventually. Better to learn by choice than by force." She poured coffee. "You seem like smart woman. Good. Mr. Hale needs smart woman. Beautiful woman would bore him. Weak woman would break. But smart woman who can survive 7 winters alone? That woman can handle this ranch. Handle him." It was the most honest assessment of her new marriage Eliza had heard. "You've known him a long time? Since he was boy?" "I knew his parents. Good people, hard people. His father built this ranch from nothing. His mother kept it running when his father died. Then she died too, and Mr. Hale—" Mrs. Chen's face darkened. "He closed off. Like house with all the shutters locked. Works, works, works. Never lets anyone close. Until you. He didn't marry me because he wants someone close. He married me because he needs household help. Maybe, maybe not. Mr. Hale doesn't do anything without good reason. If he just wanted help, he'd hire help. He wanted wife. That means something different." She studied Eliza. "You don't love him yet." "We barely know each other." "Good. Love that comes too fast burns out too fast. Love that grows slow lasts long." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Eat. Then I show you the house properly. Your mistress here now should know what you're mistress of." Eliza ate while Mrs. Chen narrated the ranch's rhythm. When the men came in for meals, when supplies arrived from town, when the cattle needed moving, when winter would truly arrive and lock them all in place for months. It was overwhelming. Eliza had managed a 1-room schoolhouse. Now she was expected to help manage an operation that fed 20 people, maintained dozens of buildings, and generated more money in a year than she'd seen in her entire life. After breakfast, Mrs. Chen gave her a tour. The house was larger than it appeared. Pantry, cold cellar, laundry room, even a bathing room with a copper tub that could be filled with heated water. Luxury. Actual luxury on the frontier. "Mr. Hale's father installed the tub," Mrs. Chen explained. "Said his wife deserved one civilized thing in the wilderness. Mr. Hale keeps it working even though he just uses the pump outside like an animal. Now you can use it properly." They were inspecting the library, a small room lined with maybe 200 books, when Garrick appeared in the doorway, covered in dust and smelling like cattle. Didn't mean to interrupt. He stayed in the doorway, careful not to track dirt inside. "Just wanted to see if you needed anything." "Mrs. Chen's been very helpful." "Good." He shifted his weight. "I thought maybe this afternoon I could show you around outside. Introduce you to the men, so they know you're not just temporary." The way he said it made Eliza wonder how many people expected this marriage to fail. "I'd like that." He nodded and left. "See?" Mrs. Chen whispered. "He's trying. Doesn't know how, but trying. That's more than most men do." That afternoon, bundled against wind that could strip skin from bone, Eliza walked the ranch with Garrick. He introduced her to his foreman, a grizzled man named Tate, who looked her over like she was a new horse he wasn't sure about. "Ma'am," Tate said, tipping his hat. "Welcome to the Hale Ranch. Any trouble from the men? You let me know." "I appreciate that." "Tate runs the day-to-day operations," Garrick explained. "Been here longer than I have, worked for my father. Knows more about cattle than any man alive." "And Mr. Hale knows more about stubbornness than any bull?" Tate said dryly. You'll fit right in. They walked the property boundaries, or as much as could be covered in an afternoon. The Hale Ranch stretched for thousands of acres, bordered by pine ridges to the north and open prairie to the south. My father bought this land 20 years ago, Garrick said, standing on a rise that overlooked everything. Everyone said he was crazy, too remote, too dangerous, too hard. But he saw what it could become. Built it piece by piece. Every fence post, every building, every head of cattle, he earned it. It must be hard maintaining everything he built. It's harder knowing he didn't live to see it prosper. He died when I was 22, left me a ranch that was barely breaking even and a territory full of vultures waiting for me to fail. His jaw tightened. Took me 10 years to prove them wrong. Another 8 to turn this into the most profitable operation in Colorado Territory. And every single day I wonder if he'd think it was good enough. It was the most personal thing he'd ever told her.
I think, Eliza said carefully, that any father would be proud of a son who honored his legacy this well. Garrick looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Maybe. They walked back as the sun started setting. The temperature dropped viciously, turning the world into a freezer. Winter's going to be brutal this year, Garrick said. I can feel it. We're ready. Enough hay, enough supplies, enough firewood to burn until spring. But it's going to test us. I've survived 7 winters in Cold Creek Basin. In town. With neighbors. With stores nearby. This is different. Out here, if something goes wrong, we handle it ourselves or we die. No rescue parties, no help coming, just us. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was preparing her. I understand. Do you? He stopped walking. Because I need to know you won't panic when we're snowed in for weeks. Won't break when the isolation gets heavy. Won't regret this arrangement when you realize how hard frontier life really is. Eliza met his eyes. I married you because I'm a survivor, Garrick. Not because I'm fragile. If I wanted easy, I would have gone east years ago. I'm still here because I'm too stubborn to quit, same as you. For the first time since she'd met him, Garrick Hale smiled. A small smile, barely there, but real. Good, he said. Stubbornness is the most valuable trait out here. The first week of marriage established a rhythm. Garrick worked from before dawn until after dark. Eliza helped Mrs. Chen manage the household, learned the ranch's routines, and began organizing the chaotic library into something functional. They ate dinner together each night, the only time Garrick truly stopped moving. He wasn't much for conversation, but he listened when she talked about books, about ideas, about the students she missed teaching. You could still teach, he said one night. Town's only 3 hours away. You could ride in twice a week if you wanted. In winter? I'd take you, or send Tate. The schoolhouse needs you more than this ranch does. It was a kindness she hadn't expected, an understanding that she was more than just a household manager. I'll think about it. Days blurred together. Eliza found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't realized she'd been tense. No worrying about rent. No calculating whether she could afford lamp oil. No lying awake wondering if she'd die alone in a boarding room. Instead, she learned the names of the ranch hands, learned which cattle were problematic, learned how to read weather by watching the way pine branches moved, and slowly, carefully, she learned Garrick. He was a man of routines and silences. He didn't waste words, didn't make promises he couldn't keep. Worked until exhaustion was a constant companion, but he also fixed the chair in her room without being asked. Built a small shelf for her books, shortened his walking stride so she could keep pace during evening walks. Small things. Thoughtful things. Things that suggested he saw her as more than a contract. 2 weeks into their marriage, a blizzard hit. It came fast. Blue sky at breakfast. White out by lunch. Wind howled like something alive and furious, slamming snow against the windows hard enough to crack glass. The ranch hands retreated to the bunkhouse. Mrs. Chen had gone to town the day before and couldn't return. Garrick secured the livestock, then came inside covered in ice. It's bad, he said, stripping off frozen layers. Could last 3 days, maybe more. They were alone in the house, truly alone for the first time. Eliza cooked dinner while Garrick added more wood to the fire. They ate in the parlor, where warmth concentrated. You ever been in a blizzard this bad? He asked. Once. The winter my father died. I thought the boarding house would collapse. Did you panic? I was too angry to panic.
Angry that the frontier had taken both my parents. Angry that I was alone. Angry that no one seemed to care. She stared into the fire. Anger kept me warm when nothing else would. I know that anger. Garrick's voice was quiet. After my parents died, I was furious for years. Worked myself half to death because stopping meant feeling things I couldn't handle. Easier to be angry than sad. What changed? Nothing. I'm still angry, just learned to aim it at problems instead of people. He looked at her. You have that same anger. Saw it the first time I met you. Woman who'd survived what should have broken her. I respected that. Is that why you proposed? Because you saw anger? I proposed because I saw strength wrapped in anger. That's different. Anger alone destroys. Strength channels it into something useful. He paused. I thought we might build something worthwhile together. Maybe I was wrong. You weren't wrong. The words came out before Eliza could stop them, but they were true. This strange, practical marriage was becoming something she valued. Not love, not yet, but partnership, respect. The beginning of something that might eventually turn into more. Garrick stood abruptly. I should check the fires upstairs, make sure pipes don't freeze. He left quickly, like he'd revealed too much and needed distance. Eliza sat alone by the fire, listening to the blizzard try to tear the house apart, and realized she didn't want to go back to her old life. Not because this life was perfect, but because for the first time in years she felt like she was building towards something instead of just surviving day to day. Man. The blizzard lasted 4 days. By day 3, the isolation was crushing. The world outside ceased to exist, just endless white and howling wind. Eliza read every book in the library twice. Garrick maintained the house like a man at war with winter itself. They moved around each other carefully, aware that cabin fever could turn people violent. But instead of tension, a strange comfort developed. Tell me about your father's ranch, Eliza said on day 3, desperate for conversation. Garrick looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. Why? Because I want to understand what built this place. What built you? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father was a hard man, fair but hard. He came west after the war, Civil War, couldn't stomach the South after what he'd seen. Wanted to build something new where the past didn't matter. Met my mother in a wagon train. She was a teacher, actually, from Boston. Like me. Like you. She hated the frontier at first, but she was stubborn, refused to quit. Eventually, she stopped hating it and started shaping it into something she could tolerate. Built a garden in soil that shouldn't support anything. Started a library fund in town. Taught ranch children to read using whatever books she could find. She sounds remarkable. She was. She also died cursing this land for taking my father, then taking her. Garrick's hand stilled on the rifle. Fever, like your mother. Nothing the doctor could do. She lasted 2 weeks. Near the end, she made me promise I'd keep the ranch going, said it would be a waste if everything they built died with them. And you kept that promise. Every day for 10 years? Some days I hate myself for it. Some days it's all that keeps me going. He met her eyes. You understand that. The weight of promises made to dead people. Eliza did understand. She'd promised her father not to let the frontier break her. Some days that promise was all she had. We're both haunted, she said softly. Maybe, but at least we're haunted together now. It wasn't romantic, wasn't poetic, but it was honest. And honesty, Eliza was learning, was worth more than pretty words. On day 4, the blizzard broke. Sunshine returned painfully bright on fresh snow. The world looked newborn, white and pure and dangerous. Garrick immediately went outside to assess damage. Eliza followed, needing air that wasn't stale from days indoors. Everything had survived. Buildings, livestock, fences. Garrick's preparation had been thorough. But as they stood surveying the ranch, Tate rode up from the southern pasture, his face grim. Boss, we got problems. What kind? Fence cut, 20 head of cattle missing, and tracks, at least 6 horses. This wasn't weather damage. This was deliberate. Garrick's entire demeanor changed. The thoughtful man from the past 4 days disappeared, replaced by something colder. Rustlers? Worse. Tracks lead toward Mercer's land. The name hit like a physical blow. Eliza saw Garrick's hands curl into fists. Who's Mercer? She asked. Trouble, Garrick said flatly. Tate, gather the men. I want armed patrols on every boundary. No one crosses our land without my knowing about it. Already done, boss. After Tate left, Eliza touched Garrick's arm. What's happening? He looked at her with an expression that mixed anger and something darker, fear. Silas Mercer owns the ranch north of here. He's been trying to expand for years, claims half my land belongs to him because of some boundary dispute from before my father bought the property. It's nonsense. The deed is clear, but Mercer doesn't care about legality. He cares about power. Why would he cut your fences? Because he thinks I'm vulnerable now. New wife, winter coming, attention divided. He's testing me, seeing if I'll fold. Garrick's jaw tightened. He picked the wrong season and the wrong man. But there was something else in his voice, something that made Eliza's instincts scream warning. What aren't you telling me? Garrick was silent for a long moment. Then, my father died during a dispute with Mercer, officially ruled an accident, but I've never believed that. And if Mercer thinks he can finish what he started 20 years ago, he's about to learn exactly how much my father's son. He walked away before Eliza could respond. And for the first time since their marriage began, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Not because Garrick was cruel, but because the frontier was about to become a battlefield. And she'd just signed a contract that put her directly in the crossfire. The cattle thieves returned 3 nights later. This time, Garrick was waiting. Eliza woke to the sound of gunfire cracking across the frozen prairie like brittle bones snapping. She bolted upright, heart hammering, disoriented in the darkness. More shots. Shouting. The thunder of horses moving fast. She stumbled to the window. In the moonlight reflecting off snow, she could see figures moving near the southern corrals. Some on horseback, others on foot, muzzle flashes lighting up the night in brief, violent bursts. Garrick's bedroom door slammed open across the hall. His footsteps pounded down the stairs. Eliza grabbed her robe and followed, taking the steps 2 at a time. By the time she reached the ground floor, Garrick was already at the gun cabinet, loading a Winchester rifle with practiced speed that spoke of too much experience. "Stay inside," he said without looking at her. "Bar the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except me or Tate." "What's happening?" "What I expected to happen." He shoved ammunition into his pockets. "Mercer's men trying to run off more cattle. We caught them this time." "You knew they'd come back?" "I've known Silas Mercer for 20 years. He doesn't make one move. He makes 5 until you either submit or put him down." Garrick finally looked at her. His face was hard, empty of everything except cold focus. "This isn't going to end quietly, Eliza. You need to understand that. This is going to get worse before it gets better." More gunfire outside. Closer now. "Then let me help. I can shoot." "Can you kill?" The question was blunt, brutal. "Because that's what help means out here. Not target practice. Not scaring someone off. Actually pulling the trigger on another human being and living with what comes after." Eliza opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't know the answer. "That's what I thought." Garrick's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "Stay inside. If someone gets past us and tries to break in, there's a shotgun in the kitchen pantry. It's loaded. You won't need to aim carefully. Just point and fire. But unless that happens, you stay away from the windows and you stay quiet." He was gone before she could argue, disappearing into the night like he'd been born to it. Eliza stood frozen in the parlor, listening to the battle unfold outside. More shots. Screaming horses. Men yelling orders she couldn't make out. The sounds echoed off the hills, making it impossible to tell how many people were fighting or who was winning. She found herself walking to the kitchen pantry despite Garrick's orders. The shotgun was there exactly where he'd said. Heavy, cold, real. Could she kill someone? A month ago, the question would have seemed absurd. She was a school teacher. She taught children their letters and arithmetic. She believed in education, civilization, order. But the frontier didn't care what she believed. The shooting stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise, thick, waiting, full of terrible possibilities. Eliza stood in the darkness, gripping the shotgun, counting her own heartbeats. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Then footsteps on the porch. "Eliza, it's me. Open up." Garrick's voice. She recognized it, but forced herself to look through the window first, confirming it was actually him before unbarring the door. He looked like he'd been through hell. Blood on his coat. She couldn't tell if it was his. hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, face pale in the lamplight. "Are you hurt?" She reached for him instinctively. "Not my blood." He moved past her, setting his rifle down carefully. "We killed 2 of them. 3 more got away. Tate took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll live. We saved most of the herd." "You killed 2 men." "I did what was necessary." His voice was flat, empty. "They came onto my land, armed, trying to destroy what I've built. I didn't start this fight, but I'll finish it." He walked to the kitchen pump and worked the handle, splashing icy water over his face and hands. The basin turned pink. Eliza watched him, seeing clearly for the first time the violence that lived inside this man. Not the controlled strength she'd witnessed before, but something rawer, something that had learned to kill and made peace with it years ago. "Who were they?" she asked quietly. "Mercer's men. I recognized one of them. Works at his ranch. Has for years. This wasn't random cattle theft. This was Mercer sending a message." "What message?" Garrick dried his face on a towel, leaving red streaks. "That he's coming for everything I have. The land, the cattle, the ranch." He met her eyes. "You." The word hung in the air like smoke. "Me? You think he doesn't know we just got married? That he doesn't know exactly how to hurt me now?" Garrick's hands clenched. "I brought you here thinking you'd be safer than in town, but I might have just painted a target on your back. Then we go to the sheriff. We report what happened. Let the law handle Mercer." Garrick laughed, a bitter, exhausted sound. "The sheriff is 60 years old and drunk by noon. The territorial marshal is 3 weeks' ride away and won't come for a property dispute. And Mercer has enough money to buy off anyone who might actually help." He shook his head. "There is no law out here except what we enforce ourselves." "That's not civilization. That's chaos. Welcome to the frontier, where the only thing that matters is whether you're strong enough to hold what's yours." He moved toward the stairs. "I need to change clothes, check on Tate. Then we're posting armed guards around the house for the rest of the night." He stopped at the bottom step, his back to her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I knew Mercer was a problem, but I thought I had more time before he moved openly. I should have protected you better, should have been honest about the danger. You told me winter would test us. You didn't mention we'd be tested by men with guns." "Would you have married me if I had?" Eliza considered that. "I don't know, probably not." "That's why I didn't tell you." He climbed the stairs without looking back. Eliza stood alone in the kitchen, still holding the shotgun, and realized that her practical marriage had just become something else entirely. A war. And she was now a soldier whether she wanted to be or not. The bodies were buried before dawn, hastily, without ceremony, in ground so frozen it took 3 men with pickaxes an hour to dig graves deep enough. Garrick stood over them silently while Tate, arm wrapped in bandages, gave what passed for a eulogy. "They made their choice. We made ours. The frontier doesn't forgive mistakes." That was it. No prayers, no philosophizing, just acknowledgement that men had died and life would continue without them. Eliza watched from the house. She'd never seen dead bodies before. Not like this, not violent and sudden. The school teacher part of her mind kept insisting this was wrong, barbaric, something that shouldn't happen. But another part of her, the part that had survived 7 winters alone, understood perfectly. This was how the West worked. You defended what was yours or you lost everything. After the burial, Garrick came inside. He looked decades older than his 40 years. "We need to talk," he said. They sat at the kitchen table. Outside, the ranch was coming to life. Men moving cattle, repairing the damaged fence, cleaning blood from the snow. Normal work resuming after extraordinary violence. "I'm riding to Mercer's place today," Garrick said. "Going to have a conversation with him face to face. That's suicide." "Maybe. But letting this continue is slower suicide. He needs to know I won't back down, that every man he sends, I'll send back dead." His jaw tightened. "And I need to look him in the eye and know for certain if he killed my father." There it was. The real reason beneath the practical one. "You think confronting him will give you answers?" "I think if I don't confront him now, he'll keep pushing until one of us is dead anyway. At least this way, I control the when and where." Garrick leaned back. "I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what's happening, but you deserve to know the risk." "If you die, what happens to me?" The blunt question seemed to catch him off guard. The ranch goes to you. It's in the contract. Everything I own becomes yours. I don't want the ranch. I want to not be a widow before I've even figured out how to be a wife. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Then I'll try not to die. That's not reassuring. It's the best I can offer. He stood. Mrs. Chen will be here soon. Tate will stay close to the house. You'll be protected. I don't need protection. I need you to stop treating this like some kind of suicide mission to avenge your father. It's not about revenge. His voice went cold. It's about survival. Mercer won't stop until I'm destroyed. I can either wait for him to pick his moment, or I can force the confrontation on my terms. Those are the only options. There's always another option. Not out here, there isn't. He grabbed his coat. I'll be back before dark. If I'm not, he paused. If I'm not, Tate knows what to do. He left before she could respond. Eliza sat at the table, hands shaking with frustration and fear. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. A practical marriage? Yes. A working partnership? Fine. But not this. Not watching a man she barely knew ride toward almost certain death because of pride and old wounds. Mrs. Chen arrived an hour later, took one look at Eliza's face, and started making tea. He went to Mercer's, she said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because I know Mr. Hale, and I know that look. The look of a woman watching her husband do something stupid because men believe stupid and brave are the same thing. She poured tea with steady hands. His father had that same stubborn, got him killed. What happened? Garrick said it was an accident. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long time. Mr. Hale's father, James Hale, was good man, fair man, but proud. When Mercer first claimed the boundary dispute, James refused to negotiate, said his deed was legal, his land was his land, and Mercer could go to hell. They fought for 2 years, legal fights, not shooting. Then one day, James rode to town for supplies. His horse spooked crossing the bridge, threw him into the river. He hit his head on rocks, drowned. That sounds like an accident. Maybe. Except 3 people saw Mercer's foreman near that bridge earlier in the day. Except James's horse was known for being calm, never spooked at anything. Except the saddle girth was found cut almost through, would have held for normal riding, but one good scare. Mrs. Chen shook her head. Sheriff said accident, town said accident, but Mrs. Hale, Garrick's mother, she knew. She just couldn't prove it. And now Garrick thinks he can? Garrick thinks if he pushes hard enough, Mercer will confess or make a mistake. But Mercer is not stupid. He's patient, careful, dangerous. Mrs. Chen met Eliza's eyes. And Mr. Hale is not thinking clearly. He sees you, a wife, something good in his life finally, and it makes him want to protect that good thing. But he's protecting it by doing the thing most likely to destroy it. I can't stop him. No. But you can be ready for when he comes back, because he will come back. Mr. Hale is too stubborn to die, too angry to quit. He'll come back different maybe, but he'll come back. Eliza wanted to believe that. She spent the morning helping Mrs. Chen with laundry, trying to lose herself in the mindless work of scrubbing and wringing and hanging. But her eyes kept drifting to the southern road, watching for a rider that didn't appear. Noon came. Then afternoon. The sun started dropping toward the western mountains. Tate appeared at the kitchen door. Mrs. Hale, you might want to come outside. The formal address startled her. She was still getting used to being called Mrs. Anything. But the tone of his voice made her drop the laundry and follow. 3 riders were approaching from the south. Not Garrick's horse. Not his silhouette. Tate already had his rifle ready. 2 other ranch hands flanked him, armed and tense. As the riders got closer, Eliza could see they weren't attacking. They were riding slowly, deliberately. One of them carried a white cloth tied to his rifle, a truce flag. They stopped 50 yards from the house. The man in front was older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair and a face that might have been handsome once before hardness carved it into something else. He sat his horse like a man who'd been born in a saddle and would die in one. That's Mercer, Tate said quietly. Stay behind me, ma'am. Silas Mercer dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. The 2 men with him stayed mounted, watchful. I'm here under flag of truce, Mercer called out. His voice was smooth, educated, nothing like Eliza expected. I'd like to speak with Mrs. Hale, if she's willing. Anything you got to say, you can say to me, Tate responded. This is between me and the lady, concerns her husband. Eliza's stomach dropped. Where's Garrick? Mercer smiled, not friendly, but not entirely cruel either. That's what I'm here to discuss. May I approach? I'll leave my weapons with my men. Tate looked at Eliza. She knew she should say no, should send this man away without hearing whatever poison he'd come to deliver. But she needed to know. Let him approach. But if he tries anything, I'll put a bullet in him before he takes 3 steps, Tate finished. Don't worry, ma'am. I've been wanting an excuse for 20 years. Mercer unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to one of his men. Then he walked forward, hands relaxed at his sides, moving like a man without a care in the world. Up close, Eliza could see the intelligence in his eyes. This wasn't some frontier thug. This was an educated, calculating man who'd built an empire through strategy as much as violence. Mrs. Hale, he said, tipping his hat. I apologize for the circumstances of our meeting. I would have preferred something more civilized. Where's my husband? Safe, at my ranch. We had a conversation this afternoon. Quite productive, actually, once we got past the threats and posturing. Mercer's eyes studied her with uncomfortable intensity. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone desperate. Someone Garrick married out of convenience with no real attachment. But that's not what I see. I see a woman who's genuinely concerned, which complicates things. You came here to tell me my husband is at your ranch, the place he rode to confront you, and you expect me to believe he's safe? I expect you to believe I'm not an idiot. Killing Garrick Hale on my property would bring the marshal, the territorial governor, and every rancher within 200 miles down on my head. I'm many things, Mrs. Hale, but I'm not suicidal. Mercer glanced at Tate. Your husband came to my place armed and angry. We talked. I offered him a deal. He's thinking it over. Said he needed to discuss it with you first, which surprised me, I admit. Most men don't consult their wives on business. What kind of deal? The kind that ends this conflict before more men die. I dropped the boundary dispute. He acknowledges my water rights to the northern creek. We both pull back, maintain our current holdings, and stop trying to destroy each other. Mercer's face was unreadable. I even offered to provide evidence clearing up the question of what happened to his father. That got Tate's attention. You're admitting, I'm admitting nothing, but I have information that might satisfy certain questions, in exchange for peace. Mercer looked back at Eliza. Your husband will be home by dark. He wanted me to deliver this message personally. Show good faith, he said. Prove I'm serious about negotiation. Why would you negotiate now? You've been pushing this fight for months. Something flickered across Mercer's face. Because I'm 63 years old and tired of fighting. Because winter's coming and I'd rather spend it by my fire than burying men in frozen ground. And because, he paused, because your husband is his father's son, which means this fight will never end until one of us is dead. I've won enough battles to know when I'm in a fight with no winners. It sounded reasonable, too reasonable. I don't trust you, Eliza said flatly. Mercer actually laughed. Smart woman. You shouldn't trust me. I've done terrible things to build what I have. But I'm not lying about this. Talk to your husband when he returns. Hear his side, then decide. He tipped his hat again. Good evening, Mrs. Hale. I hope our next meeting is under better circumstances. He walked back to his horse, mounted smoothly despite his age, and rode away with his men. Eliza stood watching until they disappeared over the southern ridge. What do you think? She asked Tate. I think Mercer's scared, really scared, which means either he's telling the truth about wanting peace or he's setting up something worse. Tate spit tobacco juice into the snow. Either way, boss should be home soon. We'll know more then. Garrick rode in just as the sun touched the mountains. He was alone, unhurt, but carrying an exhaustion that went deeper than physical. Eliza met him at the barn while he was unsaddling his horse. Mercer was here, she said without preamble. I know. I sent him. Garrick didn't look at her, focused on removing the saddle. Did he deliver the message? He said you're considering a deal, that he's offering peace. He is. Do you believe him? Garrick finally turned to face her. I don't know. He showed me documents, land surveys from before my father bought this property, water rights agreements, correspondence. Some of it supports his claims. Some of it supports mine. The truth is messier than I wanted it to be. And your father? He offered a sworn statement from his foreman, the man who was at the bridge that day, says he was checking fence lines, saw my father's horse acting strange, tried to warn him but was too far away. Says the saddle girth looked fine. Says it was a tragic accident and nothing more. Garrick's hands clenched. He'll testify to it. Put it in writing, legal affidavit. You think he's lying? I think he's saying what Mercer wants him to say. But I can't prove otherwise. Can't even prove the girth was cut. It happened 20 years ago. No evidence left, just suspicions and grief. He leaned against the stall door. Mercer's offering me something I've wanted for 2 decades. Answers, closure, peace. And I don't know if it's real or if it's just another way to destroy me. Eliza stepped closer. What do you want to do? I want to put a bullet in him and be done with it. But that makes me a murderer, not a rancher. And it destroys everything my parents built. He looked at her. What would you do? I'd ask what happens if you refuse the deal. Then this continues. More raids, more violence. Eventually someone makes a mistake and people die who shouldn't. His voice dropped. Eventually he might target you, use you to hurt me, and I can't risk that. There it was, the real fear beneath everything else. So you're considering the deal to protect me. I'm considering the deal because I'm tired of fighting ghosts. My father's dead. No amount of revenge will bring him back. And if making peace with Mercer means I can actually live instead of just surviving, maybe that's worth more than satisfaction. He pushed away from the stall. But I won't decide alone. This affects you too. You're my wife, partner. You get a say. It was the first time he'd called her partner instead of wife. I think, Eliza said carefully, that you should do whatever lets you sleep at night, because I didn't marry you to watch you destroy yourself over questions that might never have answers. Even if it means letting my father's killer go free. Even then, because you're not your father. You're allowed to choose something different. Garrick stared at her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he pulled her into a hug, awkward, unpracticed, but genuine. She could feel his heartbeat, fast and hard, could feel the tension in his muscles, the exhaustion, the weight of too many years carrying too much alone. Thank you, he said quietly into her hair. They stood like that until the barn got too cold and practical concerns pulled them apart. That night, after a quiet dinner where Garrick explained the full terms of Mercer's offer, they sat by the fire while wind howled outside. I'm going to accept, Garrick said finally, with conditions. The water rights stay split. He doesn't get sole access. The boundary stays where the current deeds place it, and he puts everything in writing, signed by witnesses, filed with the territorial office. And if he refuses, then we're back to war. But I don't think he will. He looked tired today, old, like this fight has cost him as much as it's cost me. Garrick stared into the flames. Maybe we're both just done. What about the truth? About your father? I'll never know for certain. I have to make peace with that. His voice was raw. Spending the rest of my life chasing a ghost won't bring him back, won't make the ranch stronger, won't protect you. It'll just make me exactly like Mercer, a bitter old man who chose revenge over life. Eliza reached over and took his hand. He startled slightly, like he'd forgotten physical comfort was allowed. I think you're making the right choice, she said. I hope so. Because if I'm wrong, if he's playing me, if this all falls apart, he squeezed her hand. I'll have sacrificed my father's memory for nothing. Or you'll have sacrificed bitterness for peace. Those aren't the same thing. They sat in silence, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to coals. Somewhere in that silence, their practical marriage shifted again. Not into love, not yet, but into something deeper than convenience. Partnership, real partnership. The kind built on hard choices and honest conversations and hands held in the dark. The next morning, Garrick rode to Mercer's ranch with Tate and 2 witnesses. They came back 6 hours later with a signed agreement, properly witnessed and legally binding. The boundary dispute was settled. Water rights were divided. Both ranches agreed to maintain current holdings without further expansion claims. And attached to the agreement was a sworn affidavit from Mercer's foreman, stating for the record that James Hale's death was a tragic accident observed but not caused. It wasn't truth, but it was closure of a kind. That night, the tension that had gripped the ranch for weeks finally released. Men laughed in the bunkhouse. Cattle moved peacefully in distant pastures. The violence that had threatened to consume everything simply stopped.
Eliza found Garrick in the library, staring at the affidavit. "Do you believe it?" she asked. "Does it matter? It's done. Over. I can't change the past." He set the paper down. "My father would probably call me weak for settling, but my father's dead and I'm alive, and I'd like to stay that way. I don't think it's weak. I think it's wise." Wisdom and weakness look the same sometimes, but he smiled when he said it. A real smile, the second one she'd seen from him. "Mrs. Chen says you smile about twice a year. I'm honored to witness one. Maybe I'll have more reason to smile now." He stood, crossing to where she sat. "Thank you for not judging me for backing down, for understanding this wasn't about cowardice. It was about choosing life over death. There's nothing cowardly about that." Garrick reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, uncertain, completely at odds with the violent rancher who'd killed 2 men less than a week ago. "I wasn't entirely honest when I proposed," he said quietly. "I told you I needed a wife for practical reasons. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." "What's the whole truth?" "That I was lonely, that this house felt like a tomb, that I wanted someone to talk to share silence with, to make this place feel less like a prison I'd built for myself." His hand dropped. "I knew romance was asking too much, but I thought maybe partnership, maybe friendship, maybe something real could grow if I just gave it a chance." Eliza's heart did something complicated in her chest. "And has it? Grown into something real?" "I think so. I think I care about you in ways I didn't expect to. Ways that scare me because they make me vulnerable." He met her eyes. "And I think you might care about me too. Not the way romance novels describe it, but something steadier, stronger." He was right. She did care. Somewhere between the practical proposal and the blizzard and the violence and the hard choices, she'd started caring about this complicated, damaged man who'd offered her safety and then shown her honesty instead. "I do care," she admitted. "I didn't expect to, but I do." "Is that enough? For you?" "It's more than I had a month ago, more than I thought I'd ever have." She stood, closing the distance between them. "I don't need poetry, Garrick. I need partnership, honesty. Someone who sees me as an equal instead of property. You've given me all that. What if I want to give you more?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. "Then give it," Eliza said. "But slowly. Let us figure out what this is instead of forcing it into some shape it's not meant to be." Garrick nodded. Then, very carefully, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. Not her lips. That would have been too much, too fast. Just her forehead, gentle and brief. "Slowly," he agreed. "We've got time now. The fighting's over. We can actually build something instead of just defending it." But he was wrong about the fighting being over, because 2 weeks later, on a morning so cold the well pump froze solid, a rider arrived from town with news that shattered their fragile peace. Silas Mercer was dead, shot in his own home during the night, his house ransacked, his safe broken into, documents stolen, including the original surveys and boundary agreements that had formed the basis of their settlement. And the territorial marshal was riding to the Hale Ranch with a warrant for Garrick's arrest. Someone had framed him for murder, and in doing so, had destroyed everything they'd just built. The marshal arrived 3 hours after the messenger, accompanied by 4 armed deputies and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Marshal William Cross was 50-something, weathered like old leather, with eyes that had seen too much frontier justice to believe in simple answers. He sat his horse in front of the Hale Ranch house with the resignation of a man doing a job he knew was wrong but couldn't avoid. Garrick met him on the porch. Eliza stood behind him, close enough to hear everything but far enough to not appear threatening. Tate and the ranch hands had positioned themselves strategically around the yard, not aggressive, but ready. "Marshal," Garrick said. His voice was level, controlled. "I assume you're here about Mercer." "You know I am." Cross dismounted slowly, favoring his left leg. "Old injury, probably." "I've got a warrant for your arrest, Hale. Witnesses place you at Mercer's ranch the night he was killed. You had motive. Everyone knows about your land dispute, and someone conveniently stole all the documents that would have proven your innocence in other matters."
What witnesses? Mercer's housekeeper says she saw a tall man in a cattleman's coat leaving the property around midnight. Matches your description. One of Mercer's hands claims he heard you and Mercer arguing that afternoon, heard you threaten to finish this permanently. Cross pulled out a pair of iron shackles. I don't particularly believe you did it, but I've got a job to do. You can come peacefully, or we can make this difficult. I was here all night, Garrick said. My wife can confirm that. So can Tate and half a dozen ranch hands. Wives lie for husbands. Employees lie for bosses. Cross sounded genuinely apologetic. I need you to come to town for questioning. Judge will decide if there's enough evidence to hold you for trial. Eliza stepped forward. How convenient that Mercer dies right after signing a peace agreement with my husband. How convenient that all the documents proving that agreement existed are now stolen. How convenient that the one person who might have had information about James Hale's death is now unable to testify. Cross's eyes sharpened. What are you suggesting, Mrs. Hale? I'm suggesting someone wanted both men dead or disgraced, someone who benefits from their conflict continuing, someone who saw a peace agreement as a threat. She kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. My husband had nothing to gain from killing Mercer. He had everything to lose. Unless he wanted revenge more than he wanted peace, one of the deputies muttered. Garrick's hands clenched, but he didn't move. I didn't kill Silas Mercer. We had our differences, but we'd settled them, legally, with witnesses. Then you won't mind coming to town to answer questions. Cross moved forward with the shackles. He minds, Tate said from the barn entrance. His rifle wasn't pointed at anyone, but it wasn't exactly pointing away either. We all mind, because everyone knows once you get a man to town, the mob decides his guilt before any judge does. The deputies' hands moved toward their weapons. The tension in the yard ratcheted up to breaking point. Stand down, Tate, Garrick said quietly. I'm not starting a war with the territorial government over this. Boss? I said stand down. Garrick looked at Eliza. I need you to do something for me. Go to the county clerk's office. Get copies of our marriage certificate, the land deed, and any other documents they have on file regarding the settlement with Mercer. Pay whatever it costs for certified copies. If this goes to trial, we'll need proof. Garrick, do it. His eyes met hers with fierce intensity. And don't come to the jail. Stay here where it's safe. Let Tate handle the ranch. And if this goes wrong, he stopped, started again. If this goes wrong, the contract stands. Everything goes to you. Don't let them take it. He held out his wrists for the shackles. Cross locked them with obvious reluctance. For what it's worth, Hale, I hope you didn't do this. Territory doesn't need another range war. It won't get one from me, but whoever actually killed Mercer, they're counting on people like you being too busy arresting the obvious suspect to look for the real one. They put Garrick on a horse, hands shackled, no weapon, surrounded by armed men. The ride to Cold Creek Basin would take 3 hours. Eliza watched them disappear over the ridge, forcing herself to breathe normally, to think clearly, to not panic. Mrs. Chen appeared beside her. He'll be okay. Mr. Hale is smart. Won't do anything stupid. He's been arrested for murder. That's already stupid. No, someone else did stupid. He's just caught in it. Mrs. Chen touched Eliza's arm. You going to town? I have to. We need those documents. Then I'm coming with you. 2 women traveling alone safer than one. And I know the clerk. She owes me favors. They left within the hour, taking the light wagon and one of the calmer horses. Tate wanted to send armed guards, but Eliza refused. We can't look like we're preparing for war. We need to look like concerned citizens seeking legal documents. Guns send the wrong message. Guns also keep you alive, Tate argued. So does not getting shot by nervous deputies who think we're starting trouble. Eliza climbed onto the wagon seat. We'll be back before dark. If we're not, then you can come looking. The ride to Cold Creek Basin was cold and tense. Eliza kept replaying everything in her head, trying to make sense of it. Mercer was dead. Someone had killed him, stolen the settlement documents, and framed Garrick in one efficient move. But who benefited? Mrs. Chen, she said slowly. Who inherits Mercer's ranch? His nephew, young man from back east, came out 2 years ago, works as Mercer's ranch manager. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. I think if Mercer had died 6 months ago, before settling with Garrick, the nephew would have inherited a disputed property worth less. But if Mercer dies after settling, with all evidence of that settlement destroyed, the nephew inherits clear title to everything Mercer claimed, including the disputed land. And if Garrick hangs for the murder, the nephew gets the Hale Ranch too, either by legal seizure or by buying it cheap from a desperate widow. They looked at each other. "We need to find those documents," Eliza said, "and we need to find out where Mercer's nephew was the night of the murder." Cold Creek Basin looked different than it had a month ago. Smaller, somehow. Less significant. Eliza had lived here for 7 years, but now it felt like a place she'd visited once and left behind. The county clerk's office was a cramped room above the general store, run by a woman named Margaret Fletcher, who looked like she'd been born disapproving of everything. "Mrs. Hale," she said, not bothering with warmth. "Surprised to see you. Thought you'd be visiting your husband in jail." "I'm here for documents. Certified copies of our marriage certificate, the Hale Ranch deed, and any filings related to the settlement between Garrick Hale and Silas Mercer." Fletcher's expression shifted to something uglier. "I'm not sure I have time to—" "Margaret," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "You remember when your son got drunk and broke the window at my cousin's restaurant? Remember who paid for that window and convinced my cousin not to press charges?" Fletcher's face tightened. "That was years ago. And I'm calling in the favor. Now, these documents are public record. Mrs. Hale has a right to them. You going to make this difficult, or you going to do your job?" For a moment, Fletcher looked like she might refuse. Then she sighed and turned to the filing cabinets. "It'll take an hour to prepare certified copies. You'll pay triple the normal fee." "Done," Eliza said. While Fletcher worked, Eliza wandered the main street. Cold Creek Basin was the same collection of rough buildings it had always been. General store, saloon, boarding house, blacksmith, church. 200 people trying to build civilization in a place that fought them every step. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, looking abandoned. Eliza walked toward it without planning to, drawn by 7 years of habit. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Desks in neat rows, chalkboard wiped clean, the smell of chalk dust and old wood. She'd stood here every morning, teaching children their letters while slowly dying inside from loneliness and purposelessness. She'd thought this was her life. This room, these children, this slow fade into irrelevance. Now she had a husband accused of murder, a ranch to protect, and enemies she didn't know trying to destroy everything she'd started building. It wasn't better, exactly, but it was more alive. "Miss Thorne?" Eliza turned. Rebecca Sutton stood in the doorway. The girl who'd asked about her leaving, back when her future had been uncertain for different reasons. "Rebecca, you're not in school? Teacher got sick. We've been dismissed for 2 weeks until they find someone new." The girl stepped inside hesitantly. "Is it true? About Mr. Hale? That he killed Mr. Mercer?" "No, it's not true. Mama says he did it, says men like Mr. Hale always end up violent, says you should leave him before he hurts you too." The casual cruelty of frontier gossip. Everyone knew everything and understood nothing. "Your mama doesn't know my husband. Neither does anyone else in this town. They see a man who's quiet and assume he's dangerous. They see someone who's different and decide he's guilty." Eliza's voice was sharper than she intended. "My husband didn't kill anyone, but someone did, and they're hoping the town is too busy judging Garrick to look for the truth." Rebecca looked uncertain. "Mama says—" "I don't care what your mama says." Eliza softened her tone. "I care about the truth. And the truth is that someone murdered a man and is trying to frame an innocent person. That should matter more than gossip." The girl nodded slowly. "I hope you're right, Miss Thorne. I always liked you. Wouldn't want—" She trailed off. "Wouldn't want what?" "Wouldn't want you to be wrong about him. Wouldn't want you to get hurt." She left before Eliza could respond. Eliza stood alone in the schoolhouse, feeling the weight of the town's judgment pressing down like physical force. Everyone had already decided Garrick was guilty. The trial, if it even happened, would be a formality before the hanging, unless she could prove otherwise. She returned to the clerk's office. Fletcher had the documents ready: marriage certificate, land deed, and 2 pages of notes regarding the Mercer settlement filing. "This is everything?" Eliza asked, scanning the settlement notes. "Everything that was filed, though I'm surprised any of it exists. Heard all Mercer's copies were stolen. These are the county's official records. The thieves couldn't steal these without breaking into a government office. Lucky for you, Fletcher said, though her tone suggested she didn't think it was luck at all. Eliza paid $30 for documents that should have cost $10 and left with Mrs. Chen. Outside, the sun was dropping toward the western mountains. They had maybe 2 hours of daylight left. We should head back, Mrs. Chen said. Getting dark soon. First, I need to visit someone. Eliza turned toward the saloon. Mercer's nephew. Does he stay in town or at the ranch? Town. Has a room at the boarding house. Why? Because I want to look him in the eye and see what's there. The boarding house was run by Mr. Donovan, the same man who'd been raising Eliza's rent before Garrick proposed. He looked startled to see her. Mrs. Hale, didn't expect, that is, I heard about your husband. I'm here to see Mr. Mercer, the nephew. Is he in? Room 3, top of the stairs, but I'm not sure. Eliza was already climbing. Mrs. Chen followed, muttering something in Cantonese that was probably a prayer or a curse. She knocked on room 3. Hard. It's open, a voice called. Eliza entered. Daniel Mercer was maybe 30, with his uncle's sharp features but none of the hardness. He looked like someone playing at being a rancher, expensive boots that had never seen real work, hands too soft for manual labor, eyes too calculating for honest surprise. Mrs. Hale, he said, standing from where he'd been reading a newspaper. I wasn't expecting visitors. My condolences on your husband's arrest. Terrible situation. Is it? Eliza closed the door behind her. Because you seem remarkably calm for someone whose uncle was just murdered. I'm in shock, actually. Haven't quite processed it yet. But his eyes were clear, focused, not shocked at all. Where were you the night your uncle died? Here, in this room. Donovan can confirm it. I paid for dinner to be brought up. Went to bed early with a headache. Convenient. The truth often is. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. I understand you're upset. Your husband is facing serious charges, but accusations without evidence just make you look desperate. I have evidence. The settlement agreement between your uncle and my husband, certified county records proving they'd made peace, which makes my husband's alleged motive disappear. Something flickered in Daniel's expression. Quick, there and gone, but Eliza caught it. Surprise, anger, fear. Those documents were stolen from my uncle's safe, he said carefully. From your uncle's safe, yes, but not from the county records. Public filings can't be stolen without committing a crime against the territorial government. So unless you're willing to add that to your list of offenses, I haven't committed any offenses. Daniel's voice hardened. And you'd be wise to stop making accusations. Grief makes people say foolish things, things that could be considered slander. Slander requires false statements. I haven't said anything false. Yet. They stared at each other. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Mrs. Chen touched Eliza's arm. We should go, getting late. Eliza let herself be pulled toward the door, but she stopped at the threshold. My husband didn't kill your uncle, but someone did. Someone who benefits from both men being destroyed. Someone who inherits everything if this plays out a certain way. She met Daniel's eyes. The territorial marshal might be satisfied with easy answers, but I'm not. And I won't stop looking until I find the truth. Then you might not like what you find, Daniel said softly. Sometimes the truth is exactly what everyone already believes. Your husband is a violent man with a history of hatred for my uncle. The evidence points to him. Maybe you married a murderer, Mrs. Hale. Maybe you should accept that. Eliza left before she said something that would get her arrested too. They rode back to the ranch in tense silence. The sun set behind them, turning the prairie into a landscape of shadows and cold. By the time they reached the house, full darkness had fallen. Tate met them at the door. Any trouble? Got the documents, and confirmation that we're looking at the right person. Eliza handed him the papers. Mercer's nephew inherits everything. He has motive, opportunity, and the kind of smooth confidence that comes from thinking he's outsmarted everyone. Thinking and proving are different things. Then we need to prove it, before the trial, before they hang Garrick for something he didn't do. She spent that night at the kitchen table, reading and rereading the settlement documents. The agreement was straightforward, boundary lines confirmed, water rights divided, both parties acknowledging the disputes were resolved. But attached to the county filing was something else, A note in the clerk's handwriting. Additional documents sealed per request of S. Mercer, to be opened only in case of his death or by court order. Sealed documents. About what? Eliza found Mrs. Chen making tea. The clerk mentioned sealed documents. Did Margaret say anything about those? Just that Mercer filed them 3 weeks ago. Unusual, but legal. Said he wanted certain information protected until he died. Mrs. Chen poured tea. Could be anything. Will, personal letters, business records. Or evidence. About who killed James Hale. About his own illegal activities. About something worth murdering to keep hidden. You think the nephew knows about these documents? If he does, he's probably trying to figure out how to destroy them before anyone opens them. Eliza's mind was racing. We need to get to those documents before he does, which means we need a court order. How do you get a court order when the judge already thinks your husband is guilty? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. The next 3 days were brutal. Garrick remained in jail, held without bail pending the judge's preliminary hearing. Eliza was barred from visiting. The sheriff claimed it was for her own protection, but everyone knew it was to prevent her from helping him prepare a defense. She spent the time gathering information, talking to anyone who'd been near Mercer's ranch the night of the murder, documenting the timeline, building a case. The housekeeper who'd supposedly seen Garrick leaving? She was Daniel Mercer's mistress. Eliza discovered that through Mrs. Chen's network of town gossips. The woman had been bought. The ranch hand who'd heard Garrick threaten Mercer, he owed Daniel money, gambling debts. Another bought witness, but bought witnesses still counted in frontier justice. And Eliza had no way to prove they were lying without getting them to confess. The preliminary hearing was set for the 4th day. Eliza arrived early, dressed in her best clothes, carrying the certified documents in a leather satchel. The courthouse was packed. Everyone in Cold Creek Basin had turned out for the spectacle. Eliza saw former students, shopkeepers, ranchers she recognized, all of them watching her with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. She took a seat in the front row and waited. Garrick was brought in wearing shackles and prison clothes that hung badly on his frame. He'd lost weight in 4 days. His face was haggard, eyes hollow. But when he saw Eliza, something in his expression softened. She wanted to run to him, to grab his hands and promise everything would be fine. But guards stood between them, and the judge was already entering. Judge Hamilton was 70 if he was a day, with a face like dried leather and eyes that had sentenced too many men to death. He sat heavily, banged his gavel, and glared at the courtroom. We're here for preliminary hearing in the matter of territorial charges against Garrick Hale for the murder of Silas Mercer. Prosecution, present your case. The territorial prosecutor, a young man named Stevens, who'd clearly been reading too many Eastern law books, stood and delivered a theatrical summary of the evidence. Witnesses who saw Garrick at the scene, motive based on the land dispute, threats allegedly made, missing documents that supposedly proved Garrick's innocence but conveniently couldn't be found. It was a compelling narrative, completely wrong, but compelling. When Stevens finished, the judge turned to Garrick. Do you have representation? I represent myself, Your Honor. That's unwise. It's what I can afford, Hamilton sighed. Present your defense. Garrick stood, shackles rattling. I didn't kill Silas Mercer. We'd settled our dispute legally. I had no reason to harm him. The witnesses against me are either mistaken or lying. And I can prove I was at my ranch the entire night of the murder. My wife and 6 ranch hands will testify to that. Wives and employees, Stevens interrupted, not exactly impartial witnesses. Neither are a paid mistress and a man drowning in gambling debts, Eliza said loudly. The courtroom erupted. Hamilton banged his gavel repeatedly. Mrs. Hale, you'll have your chance to speak when called as a witness. Until then, you'll remain silent or I'll have you removed. Eliza sat down, heart pounding. But she'd made her point. Several people in the crowd were already whispering. The prosecution called their witnesses. The housekeeper testified that she'd seen a tall man in a dark coat leaving Mercer's ranch around midnight. Under cross-examination from Garrick, she admitted she'd been in bed with Daniel Mercer at the time and had only looked out the window briefly. So you saw a man's silhouette at distance, in darkness, for maybe 5 seconds? Garrick asked. It was enough. I know what I saw. You know what you were paid to say, Stevens objected. Hamilton sustained it. But the damage was done. The ranch hand testified next, claimed he'd heard Garrick threaten Mercer that afternoon. But under questioning, his story fell apart. The alleged conversation had happened in Mercer's private office, which the hand admitted he'd never been inside. He'd supposedly overheard through a closed door from 20 feet away. "That's remarkable hearing," Garrick said dryly. "I know what I heard. You know what Daniel Mercer told you to say so he'd forgive your gambling debts?" More objections. More gavel banging, but the witnesses were crumbling. Then Eliza was called. She walked to the witness stand on shaking legs and swore to tell the truth. Stevens started gently. "Mrs. Hale, you've been married to the defendant for how long?" 5 weeks. "A very short time. Did you know your husband before this marriage?" "Not well. So you're testifying based on 5 weeks of acquaintance with a man you admittedly barely know. Is that correct?" "I'm testifying based on 5 weeks of living with a man who has shown me nothing but honesty, integrity, and respect. A man who settled a legal dispute peacefully when he could have chosen violence. A man who has been framed for murder by someone who benefits from his destruction. You're making serious accusations." "I'm stating facts." Eliza pulled the documents from her satchel. "These are certified county records proving that Garrick Hale and Silas Mercer signed a legal settlement 3 weeks ago. The dispute was resolved. My husband had no motive to kill Mr. Mercer." Stevens took the documents, scanned them, and his face went pale. "These could be forgeries." "They're certified by the county clerk. Are you accusing the territorial government of participating in fraud?" Stevens looked at the judge helplessly. Hamilton held out his hand for the documents. He read them slowly, thoroughly. The courtroom waited in absolute silence. Finally, Hamilton looked up. "These appear authentic, and if authentic, they significantly undermine the prosecution's theory of motive." He turned to Stevens. "Do you have any explanation for why a man who just settled a legal dispute would immediately murder the other party and destroy the proof of that settlement? Perhaps he had other reasons. Then you'd better present them, because right now your case looks weak." Eliza stepped down. As she passed Garrick, he mouthed, "Thank you." The prosecution rested. Hamilton called a recess to consider the evidence. During the break, Eliza found herself cornered by Daniel Mercer in the courthouse hallway. "Clever," he said quietly. "The county records. I should have thought of that. You should confess. Save everyone the trouble of proving what we both know." "I didn't kill my uncle." "Then who did?" Daniel smiled. "Maybe he killed himself. He was an old man, tired of fighting. Maybe he saw one last way to destroy Garrick Hale, frame him for murder, make it look convincing, leave the territory to someone who'd finish what he started." The theory was insane. But something in Daniel's voice made Eliza wonder if he actually believed it. "Your uncle wouldn't—" "My uncle hated Garrick Hale more than he loved life. He spent 20 years trying to destroy that ranch. You think a peace agreement signed under pressure meant he'd actually given up?" Daniel leaned closer. "Maybe you didn't know Silas Mercer as well as you thought. Maybe this is exactly the kind of thing he'd do." Before Eliza could respond, the bailiff called everyone back. Hamilton had made his decision. "After reviewing the evidence, I find insufficient probable cause to bind the defendant over for trial. The settlement documents establish that Mr. Hale had no apparent motive for murder. The witness's testimony is questionable at best, and the prosecution has failed to present any physical evidence linking the defendant to the crime." He banged his gavel. "Garrick Hale, you're free to go. Case dismissed." The courtroom exploded into noise, some people cheering, most angry. Eliza pushed through the crowd toward Garrick. A deputy was removing his shackles. He stood slowly, rubbing his wrist, looking dazed. "You're free," Eliza said when she reached him. "Thanks to you." He pulled her into a hug that was too tight, too desperate, too public. But Eliza didn't care. "We should leave, quickly, before anyone decides to take justice into their own hands." They made it outside before the crowd fully mobilized. Tate was waiting with the wagon and 3 armed ranch hands. "Figured you might need an escort," he said. They rode out of Cold Creek Basin at a pace just short of running. Behind them, Eliza could hear angry voices, arguments, the sound of a town that felt cheated of its hanging. Halfway home, Garrick finally spoke. "What Daniel said to you in the hallway. I heard some of it, about his uncle maybe killing himself. It was nonsense trying to justify what he did. Maybe. Or maybe there's truth in it. Garrick stared at the horizon. Mercer was the type to plan revenge from beyond the grave, arrange things so that even in death, he'd destroy his enemies. I wouldn't put it past him. Even if it's true, it doesn't matter. You're free. We can go back to our lives. Can we? Because someone still killed Mercer, whether it was Daniel or some other enemy or Mercer himself in an elaborate suicide. Those sealed documents still exist. Whatever secrets they contain, someone's willing to kill for them. He looked at her. This isn't over, Eliza. It's just moved to a different battlefield. She knew he was right. Could feel it in the tension that still gripped her shoulders, the way Tate kept watching the trail behind them, the fact that they'd needed armed guards just to leave town safely. They'd won the battle, but the war was still coming, and somewhere in a county clerk's office, sealed documents waited to reveal truths that someone had already killed to protect. The question was whether Eliza and Garrick would survive long enough to expose them. The first attack came 2 nights after they returned to the ranch. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Garrick cursing as he yanked on his boots. She sat up, disoriented, and saw orange light flickering through the bedroom window. "The barn," Garrick said, already moving. "Stay inside, lock the door." But Eliza was already dressing, grabbing the heavy wool coat she kept by the bed. "I'm not hiding while everything burns." He didn't argue, which told her how bad it was. They ran outside together into chaos. The barn was engulfed, flames eating through dry timber with terrifying speed. Ranch hands were already forming a bucket line from the well, but everyone knew it was hopeless. The barn was gone. All they could do now was keep the fire from spreading to the other buildings. Tate appeared through the smoke, face blackened. "Wasn't an accident, boss. Found accelerant splashed along the west wall. Someone set this deliberately."
"The horses?" Garrick's voice was tight. "Got them out, lost some tack, most of the winter hay, tools, but the animals are safe." The barn collapsed inward with a roar, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Eliza watched 2 years of stored supplies turn to ash in minutes. Watched Garrick's face as he calculated the cost. Not just in money, but in vulnerability. Winter was coming. They'd just lost half their feed reserves. "Round up the men," Garrick said quietly. "Armed patrol. I want someone watching every approach to this ranch until sunrise." "Already done." "Then expand the perimeter, because whoever did this is probably still out there, watching to see if we burn." They fought the fire until dawn, making sure nothing else caught. By the time the sun rose over the eastern prairie, the barn was a smoking skeleton of charred beams and memories. Mrs. Chen brought coffee and bread. The ranch hands ate in exhausted silence. Garrick stood apart, staring at the ruins. Eliza walked over to him. Soot streaked his face. His hands were blistered from handling hot tools. He looked like he'd aged another 10 years overnight. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough. We can rebuild, but not before winter. We'll have to stable the horses in the equipment shed, store what's left of the hay under tarps. We'll make it work, but it'll be tight." He wiped his face, leaving darker smears. "This was a warning. Daniel wants us to know he can hurt us whenever he wants." "You're sure it was him?" "Who else? Town already hates me for being acquitted. Mercer's men have reason to seek revenge, and Daniel inherits everything if I'm destroyed, legally or otherwise." Garrick's hands clenched. "He's trying to break us before making his next move." "Then we get those sealed documents, force them open. Whatever Mercer hid, it might be enough to prove Daniel's involved. Or it might be nothing. Personal correspondence. A will we already know about. Things that don't help us at all." But Garrick's expression said he was considering it. "Getting a court order means going back to town, facing Hamilton again. He barely let me walk free last time. Then I'll go. He can't refuse me access to my own evidence." "He can if he thinks you're harassing a murder victim's family." Garrick turned to face her fully. "Every move we make now will be watched, judged, used against us. We have to be careful. Careful won't stop another fire. Careful won't protect this ranch." Eliza kept her voice low but firm. "We need to attack, not defend. Find proof of what Daniel did. Expose him before he destroys us. And if there is no proof, if he's been smart enough to cover his tracks, then we make him nervous enough to make a mistake." Garrick studied her for a long moment. "You've changed. When I met you, you were a schoolteacher trying to survive. Now you're talking about psychological warfare like you've been planning battles your whole life. I've been fighting to survive my whole life. I just didn't have anything worth fighting for until now. She touched his arm. This ranch, this life, I won't let someone take it without a fight.
Something in Garrick's expression softened. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He almost smiled. Then Tate called out from the ruins, holding something. Boss, you need to see this. They walked over. Tate held a partially burned piece of wood, part of a board that had been nailed near the barn entrance. On it, scratched in crude letters, "Guilty men, hang." Left it where we'd find it after the fire died down, Tate said. Wants us to know this isn't random. Garrick took the board, staring at the message. His face went completely blank. The expression Eliza had learned meant he was furiously angry but keeping it controlled. Burn it, he said finally. Don't let the men see it. Don't give whoever wrote this the satisfaction of knowing it rattled us. Boss, burn it, Tate. After Tate left, Garrick stood silent for so long Eliza thought he wouldn't speak. Then, my father built that barn, first structure on this property. He and my mother spent 3 weeks cutting timber, hauling it, fitting every board by hand. She carved her initials on one of the support beams, said it was her way of leaving a mark on the frontier. His voice was hollow. Now it's ash. And someone did it to punish me for crimes I didn't commit. We'll build a new barn. Better than before. It won't have her initials. Eliza understood then what he'd really lost. Not just supplies and shelter, but one more connection to parents who'd died too young, leaving him alone to carry their legacy. Then we'll carve new initials, ours. And someday our children will see them and know we built something that lasted despite everything trying to destroy it. Garrick looked at her sharply. Children? Eventually. If we survive this. She met his eyes. I'm not giving up on this life, Garrick. I'm not letting Daniel Mercer or anyone else drive us off. We fight. We win. We build. That's what your parents did. That's what we'll do. He pulled her close, crushing her against his chest in a hug that spoke of desperation and gratitude, and something deeper neither of them had named yet. Then we fight, he said into her hair. But smart, careful. We can't win if we're dead. The next morning, Eliza rode to town alone despite Garrick's protests. She needed to move fast, and armed escorts would only make people more suspicious. The county clerk's office was empty when she arrived. Margaret Fletcher looked up from her desk with obvious displeasure. Mrs. Hale. Back again? I need to file a motion for access to the sealed documents Silas Mercer deposited before his death. That requires a court order. I know. I need the forms to request one. Fletcher's mouth tightened. Those documents are sealed for a reason. You can't just, I can file a legal motion requesting judicial review. That's my right under territorial law, unless you're refusing me access to public legal processes. Eliza kept her voice level. Because I'm happy to ride to the territorial capital and report that Cold Creek Basin's clerk is denying citizens their legal rights. For a moment, Fletcher looked like she might refuse anyway. Then she pulled out a form and slammed it on the counter. Fill this out? Judge Hamilton reviews motions on Thursdays. That's 2 days from now. He may or may not grant your request. Thank you. Eliza filled out the form carefully, stating her case. As the wife of a man accused and then acquitted of Silas Mercer's murder, she had standing to review any documents that might clear her husband's name or identify the actual killer. The sealed documents might contain relevant evidence. Justice required their review. It was a thin argument, but it was something. She filed the motion and left before Fletcher could think of reasons to delay it. On her way out of town, she passed the boarding house. Daniel Mercer was standing on the porch, watching her. He didn't wave, didn't acknowledge her, just watched with an expression that made her skin crawl. Eliza kept riding. Back at the ranch, she found Garrick and Tate in the equipment shed, trying to figure out how to fit 8 horses into a space meant for 3. Filed the motion, she told them. Hamilton reviews it Thursday. He'll deny it, Tate said. No judge is going to open sealed documents on the request of an accused murderer's wife. Maybe, but filing it accomplishes something else. It tells Daniel we're not backing down, that we're actively hunting for evidence. Might make him nervous. Or might make him more aggressive, Garrick countered. He burned the barn as a warning. What happens when warnings don't work? They found out 3 days later.
Eliza was in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen making bread when one of the ranch hands burst through the door. "Mrs. Hale, we got trouble at the south pasture." They rode out together, Eliza, Garrick, Tate, and 4 armed men. What they found made Eliza's stomach turn. 20 cattle lay dead in the snow. Not shot. Poisoned. Their bodies were already stiffening in the cold, mouths frozen in final agony. "Water trough was poisoned," Tate said, examining it. "Looks like arsenic. Whole herd drank from it." "That's $2,000 of livestock," one of the hands said. "Gone in a night." Garrick dismounted and walked among the dead animals. His face was expressionless, but Eliza knew him well enough now to see the rage beneath. "How many head do we have left?" he asked quietly. "Maybe 200. Enough to survive winter. Barely. But not enough to turn a profit come spring. Not enough to rebuild what we've lost." Garrick nodded slowly. Then he turned to Tate. "Sell half of what's left. Today. Get whatever price you can. We need cash more than we need cattle we can't feed anyway." "Boss, selling in winter means taking a loss." "I know what it means. Do it anyway." He looked at the dead herd. "Daniel wants to bleed us dry before finishing us off." "Fine. We'll cut our losses, consolidate what we can protect, and prepare for whatever comes next." "What does come next?" Eliza asked. "Either he makes a direct move or we do. But this half-measure harassment is building towards something. The question is who acts first." Thursday arrived. Eliza rode to town for Hamilton's ruling on her motion. The judge's chambers were small, cramped, smelling of old paper and tobacco. Hamilton sat behind a desk buried in documents, looking even older and more tired than before. "Mrs. Hale," he said without preamble, "I've reviewed your motion." And I'm denying it. You have no legal standing to access sealed documents that don't pertain to you. Your husband was acquitted. The matter is closed. Mercer's personal papers are his family's business, not yours. Those papers might contain evidence. Of what? Your husband's innocence was already established. Or are you suggesting there's evidence of something else? Some other crime? Hamilton's eyes sharpened. Be careful, Mrs. Hale. Making accusations without proof is a dangerous game. I'm not making accusations. I'm seeking truth. Truth is whatever a court determines it to be. And this court determines that you have no right to Silas Mercer's sealed documents. He stood, dismissing her. Go home. Rebuild your ranch. Stop stirring up trouble in my town. Eliza left, frustration burning in her chest. She'd expected denial, but hearing it still stung. Outside, she nearly collided with Daniel Mercer. Bad news? He asked, smiling. You were listening. Public building, public hallway. Can't help what I overhear. He fell into step beside her as she walked toward her horse. You should take the judge's advice. Go home. Stop fighting battles you can't win. I haven't lost yet. Haven't you? Barn burned, cattle poisoned, husband's reputation destroyed. Town hates you both. Winter coming with half your supplies gone. Daniel's voice was pleasant, conversational. How long do you think you can last? Long enough. For what? To discover some magical evidence that saves you? To prove I'm the villain you think I am? He laughed. You're chasing ghosts, Mrs. Hale. My uncle is dead. Your husband was acquitted. The story is over. Accept it. Not until I know the truth. The truth is that my uncle spent 20 years hating Garrick Hale. The truth is he died before seeing that hatred satisfied. And the truth is that sometimes bad things happen to people who don't deserve them. Daniel stopped walking. That's the frontier. Unfair, brutal, unforgiving. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move on. Or, Eliza said quietly, the sooner I accept that, the sooner you win. Something flickered in his expression. I've already won. You just haven't realized it yet. He walked away, leaving Eliza standing in the cold street, shaking with anger and fear. She rode home slowly, mind churning. Every legal avenue was blocked. Every attempt to investigate met resistance. And winter was tightening its grip, making everything harder. By the time she reached the ranch, exhaustion had settled into her bones. Garrick met her at the door. One look at her face told him everything. Denied. Denied. He pulled her inside where it was warm. Mrs. Chen had soup ready. The fire was burning. Everything looked normal, domestic, safe, but Eliza could feel the walls closing in. What do we do now? She asked over dinner.
Garrick was quiet for a long time. Then, we prepare for war. Real war, not this half-measure harassment. Daniel's building towards something. I can feel it. And when it comes, we need to be ready. Ready how? Armed, fortified, alert. He looked around the house. This place was built to survive blizzards, not sieges. We need to change that. Over the next week, the ranch transformed. Garrick had shutters reinforced, extra ammunition stockpiled, food supplies moved to the cellar where they'd be protected from fire. He posted guards at night, established patrol routes, turned their home into a fortress. The men grumbled but obeyed. They'd all seen the barn burn, the cattle die. They knew this was serious. Eliza helped where she could. She learned to shoot properly, not just point and fire, but actually hit what she aimed at. Tate taught her, patient and methodical, until she could put 3 bullets in a target at 50 yards. "You're a natural," he said after one session. "I'm a terrified woman learning to protect herself." Same thing on the frontier. At night, Eliza lay awake listening to the house settle, the wind howl, the guards change shifts outside. Garrick rarely slept more than a few hours, always alert, always waiting. "This can't last," she told him one night, "living like this. Always afraid." "I know." "Then what's the end game? We can't fight Daniel forever. We can't prove what he did. We can't access the documents. We're just waiting." Garrick was silent. Then, "My father used to say that when you can't win by attacking, you win by making your enemy attack you on your terms. Let them overextend, make mistakes, reveal themselves. You want Daniel to attack the ranch. I want him to try. Because here, we're ready, we're armed, we're prepared. And if he comes at us directly, finally makes an open move instead of skulking in shadows, we might be able to end this. Or we might all die. That's the risk. But I'd rather die fighting than slowly bleed out from harassment." He looked at her in the darkness. "I'm sorry. I brought you into this thinking I could protect you. Instead, I've made you a target." "You didn't make me anything. I chose this, chose you, chose this life." She took his hand. "And I'll keep choosing it even when it's hard." He pulled her close. They lay together in the dark, listening to the wind test the walls, both knowing that somewhere out there, their enemy was planning his next move. The attack came during the first major blizzard of winter. It started in the early afternoon, snow falling so thick visibility dropped to 20 feet, wind howling hard enough to make conversation impossible. The kind of storm that locked the world down and dared anyone to move. Garrick called everyone inside the main house. 13 people total. Eliza, Mrs. Chen, Tate, and 10 ranch hands. They barred the doors, loaded weapons, and waited. "If Daniel's smart, he'll use this storm as cover," Garrick told them. "Can't see clearly, can't track footprints, can't pursue. Perfect conditions for an assault. Or for us to shoot our own people by mistake," one of the hands pointed out. "That's why we don't fire unless we're certain. But stay alert. Watch the windows. Listen for anything unusual." The first sign came 2 hours after dark, a crash from the kitchen. Everyone spun toward the sound. Garrick moved fast, rifle ready. He threw open the kitchen door. A window had shattered. Snow was blowing in, and on the floor, wrapped around a rock, was a note. Garrick picked it up, read it, and his face went white. "What does it say?" Eliza asked. He handed it to her. "Leave before sunrise or burn like your barn. This is your final warning." "He's giving us a chance to run," Tate said. "He's trying to scare us into making a mistake," Garrick corrected. "Wants us to bolt into the storm where we're vulnerable, or wants us to panic and do something stupid. Or maybe he means it," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Maybe he will burn this house with all of us inside." The possibility hung in the air like smoke. Eliza looked around at the faces watching her and Garrick. These people had trusted them, worked for them, stayed loyal despite everything. Now they were trapped in a house that might become their funeral pyre. "Anyone who wants to leave can," she said clearly. "We won't stop you. Take a horse, ride to town, wait this out somewhere safe. No judgment." Nobody moved. "We stay with the boss," one of the younger hands said. "He's treated us fair, paid us on time, took care of us. We don't run." The others murmured agreement. Garrick looked genuinely moved. "Thank you, all of you, but understand, if they come, they'll come to kill.
This won't be warning shots and harassment. This will be a fight to the finish. Then we'd better win, Tate said simply. They spent the next hour preparing. Furniture was moved to create defensive positions. Water buckets were filled in case of fire. Extra ammunition was distributed. The house became a small fortress manned by people who decided that running was worse than fighting. Eliza found herself at a second-floor window with a rifle, watching the storm. Snow was falling so hard she could barely see the barn ruins 30 yards away. Garrick appeared beside her. "You don't have to do this. You could hide in the cellar with Mrs. Chen." "Mrs. Chen is downstairs with a shotgun guarding the back door, and I'm not hiding while you fight." She kept her eyes on the window. "We're partners, remember? That means we stand together. Even if it means dying together? Especially then." He kissed her, quick, fierce, tasting of fear and determination. Then he moved to his own position. The attack came at midnight, fire first. Torches thrown through windows on all sides simultaneously. The house had been built solid, but fire didn't care about solid. It ate through curtains, caught on furniture, spread with terrifying speed. Men shouted orders, water flew. But everyone knew it was hopeless. The house was burning. Then gunfire erupted from outside. Bullets shattered remaining windows, punched through walls, sent splinters flying. "Return fire," Garrick yelled. "Don't let them close!" Eliza found a target, a shadow moving through the snow. She fired. Missed. Fired again. The shadow dropped. She'd just shot someone, maybe killed them. The thought should have paralyzed her. Instead, she just loaded another round. The battle became chaos. Fire and smoke and gunfire and screaming. Eliza lost track of time, just kept shooting at anything that moved outside. Someone screamed downstairs. Then an explosion. Maybe a lamp breaking. Maybe something worse. "We have to evacuate," Tate shouted up the stairs. "The fire's too big. We're going to burn." Garrick appeared through the smoke. "Out the back! Everyone to the equipment shed! Move!" They ran through the burning house. 13 people coughing and choking, trying not to get shot while flames consumed everything around them. Eliza grabbed the brass school bell from her classroom supplies as she passed. Didn't know why. Just couldn't leave it. They burst out the back door into the storm. Bullets immediately started flying. 2 ranch hands went down, one screaming, one silent. Garrick returned fire, covering their retreat. "Go! Get to the shed!" Eliza ran through knee-deep snow, the bell clutched to her chest, ears ringing from gunfire. Behind her, their home burned like a beacon against the night sky. They made it to the equipment shed, or most of them did. 11 people total. 2 dead in the yard, 1 unaccounted for. Tate barred the door. Everyone took positions at whatever openings they could find. "How many attackers?" Garrick asked, breathing hard. "I counted 8 separate muzzle flashes," someone said. "Could be more. And we're down to 11. Supplies in the house. No food. No real shelter." Garrick's face was grim. "We can hold this shed for maybe an hour before they burn us out, or rush us." "Then what?" Eliza asked. "Then we die fighting or we surrender. Those are the options." "There's a third option," Tate said. "Someone rides for help, gets to town, brings back the marshal." "Through that storm. Through armed men. That's suicide." "Maybe. But it's a chance." Tate looked at Garrick. "I'll go. I know this land better than anyone. I can make it." "You'll die in the attempt." "Probably. But we'll definitely die if we sit here." Tate grabbed his coat. "Give me your fastest horse and cover fire. I'll make town or I won't. Either way, you'll know you tried everything." Garrick looked like he wanted to argue, but they both knew Tate was right. "Take Ranger. He's fast and sure-footed. Head northeast. It's longer but avoids the main approaches where they might be waiting." Garrick gripped Tate's shoulder. "You've been like family. Don't die for me." "Ain't dying for you, dying for what's right," Tate grinned. "Besides, I always wanted a dramatic exit." They opened the shed door. Garrick and 3 others laid down covering fire while Tate sprinted for the corral where the horses were sheltered. Attackers returned fire. Bullets sparked off metal, punched through wood. But Tate made it to the corral, got on Ranger, and disappeared into the storm. Whether he'd make it or not, they wouldn't know for hours. They barricaded the shed again and waited. The house burned for another 20 minutes before the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Everything Garrick's parents had built, everything Eliza had started building with him, gone.
I'm sorry, she said quietly. For what? For not being able to save it. Garrick looked at the burning ruins. It's just a building. You're alive. Mrs. Chen's alive. Most of the men made it. That's what matters. Your mother's initials were in that house. Your father's legacy. My father's legacy is surviving when everyone expects you to fail. My mother's legacy is being strong enough to build something from nothing. He looked at her. We'll do it again. Bigger. Better. With both our initials carved somewhere prominent. If we survive this, we will, because we're too stubborn to die. An hour passed, then 2. The attackers had pulled back, but they were still out there, waiting, watching. Inside the shed, people huddled together for warmth. Someone had minor burns, another had a bullet graze. Mrs. Chen was tending wounds with supplies scavenged from the shed. Eliza sat with her back against the wall, still holding that stupid brass bell. She didn't know why she'd grabbed it. In the moment, it had seemed important. Now it just seemed absurd. Why'd you take that? Garrick asked, nodding at the bell. I don't know. Instinct? Stupidity? She ran her fingers over the tarnished brass. I used to ring this every morning to call students to class. Seemed like it represented something. Order, civilization. The idea that we're building something better than chaos. And now? Now it's just a bell I carried out of a burning house for no good reason. But she didn't put it down. 3 hours after Tate left, they heard horses approaching, multiple riders, moving fast. Everyone grabbed weapons, ready for a final stand. Then a voice called out, Garrick Hale! It's Marshal Cross! Hold your fire! They opened the door cautiously. Cross rode up with 8 deputies and Tate, who looked half frozen but alive. Your man made it to town in record time, Cross said, dismounting. Told us about the attack. We rode out immediately. He looked at the burning house. Looks like we're too late to save much. You're in time to save us. That's enough. Garrick stepped out. The attackers pulled back about 2 hours ago. Probably figured we'd burn or freeze eventually. Any idea who? Daniel Mercer. Has to be. Who else has reason? That's a serious accusation. You got proof? Just burned buildings and dead cattle and 2 ranch hands bleeding in the snow. But I can't prove it was Daniel specifically. No. Cross sighed. Then we've got a problem. Because without proof, I can't arrest him. And without arresting someone, this continues until you're all dead. So what do we do? You survive, rebuild, stay alert, and hope whoever did this makes a mistake I can actually prosecute. Cross looked genuinely sympathetic. I know that's not what you want to hear, but it's the reality. They spent the rest of the night in the equipment shed, warming themselves around a makeshift fire while the marshal's men secured the property. By dawn, the blizzard had passed. The ranch looked like a war zone. Burned barn, burned house, dead cattle in distant pastures, blood in the snow. But they were alive. And in the cold morning light, Eliza made a decision. She was done playing defense. Done waiting for Daniel to make mistakes. Done letting him control the fight. It was time to attack, and she knew exactly how to do it. Because if the law wouldn't open Mercer's sealed documents, she'd find another way in. Even if it meant breaking every rule she'd ever believed in. 3 days after the attack, Eliza rode into Cold Creek Basin alone, carrying nothing but determination and a plan that would either save them or destroy her completely. The town looked the same as always. Rough buildings clinging to existence against the winter wind, people hurrying between errands with their heads down. But now Eliza saw it differently, saw the judgment in every averted gaze, the whispered conversations that stopped when she passed, the way merchants suddenly became very busy when she entered their stores. She'd become the town pariah, the woman who'd married a murderer, who'd brought violence to their peaceful settlement, who refused to simply disappear and let things return to normal. Good. Let them judge. She had work to do. The county clerk's office was empty except for Margaret Fletcher, who looked up with her usual expression of pinched disapproval. Mrs. Hale, I heard about the fire. Terrible tragedy. Is it? Or is it exactly what this town wanted? The Hales finally getting what they deserve. Eliza didn't bother with pleasantries anymore. I need to see the filing records for Silas Mercer's sealed documents. Those are confidential. The documents are sealed. The filing records showing when they were deposited, by whom, and under what authority are public information. I'm not asking to see the contents, just the paperwork trail. Fletcher's mouth tightened, but she couldn't refuse. Public records were public. She retrieved a ledger and slapped it on the counter. Eliza scanned the entries. Mercer had filed the sealed documents 3 weeks before his death, as she'd known. But what caught her attention was the witness signature. Daniel Mercer had been present when the documents were sealed, had signed as witness to the filing, which meant he knew what was in them. And if he knew, that knowledge had influenced everything he'd done since. "Can I get a certified copy of this page?" Eliza asked. "That'll cost you. Everything in this town costs me. Just do it." While Fletcher prepared the copy, Eliza walked to the window and looked out at the street. Across the way, she could see the boarding house where Daniel was staying. Could see his horse tied outside, meaning he was there right now. An idea formed. Dangerous, probably stupid, but the only place she had left. She paid for the document and left, but instead of heading to her horse, she walked directly to the boarding house. Mr. Donovan was sweeping the front steps. He stopped when he saw her. "Mrs. Hale, I don't think... Is Daniel Mercer in his room?" "He is, but..." Eliza was already climbing the stairs. She heard Donovan calling after her, but she didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Just walked straight to room 3 and knocked hard. "It's open," Daniel's voice called. She entered and closed the door behind her. Daniel was sitting at a small desk writing letters. He looked up, genuinely surprised to see her. "Mrs. Hale, this is unexpected. We need to talk. Alone, honestly." "About what? Your husband's continued harassment of my family's legacy? The false accusations you keep making?" But he gestured to a chair. "Though I admit I'm curious what brings you here." Eliza sat, keeping her hands visible and her voice steady. "I know you killed your uncle. I know you framed Garrick, and I know you've been systematically trying to destroy us to cover your crime and steal our land." Daniel smiled. "That's quite an accusation. Any proof?" "Not yet, but I will have. Because you made a mistake. You witnessed your uncle's sealed documents, which means you know what's in them, and whatever's in them scared you enough to kill an old man and try to frame an innocent person. Or it means I was present when my uncle filed some personal papers and thought nothing of it." "Then why burn our barn, poison our cattle, attack our home?" Eliza leaned forward. "If you're innocent, why go to such lengths? I haven't done any of those things. You're paranoid, Mrs. Hale. Understandable, given the trauma you've experienced, but paranoid nonetheless." "Then prove it. Let the judge open those documents. If they contain nothing incriminating, you have nothing to fear." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Those documents are my uncle's private affairs. They have nothing to do with you or your husband." "Then what are you afraid of?" "I'm not afraid of anything." "Liar." Eliza stood. "You're terrified, because whatever your uncle wrote down, whether it's evidence of your crime or evidence of his own involvement in James Hale's death or something else entirely, it's enough to destroy you. That's why you killed him. Not for inheritance, not for land, but because he was about to expose you." "You're raving." "Am I? Then why are your hands shaking?" Daniel looked down. His hands were indeed trembling slightly. He clasped them together, composing himself. "Get out of my room, Mrs. Hale. Not until you hear my offer. You have nothing I want. I have the ability to let this go, to convince Garrick to rebuild somewhere else, to leave Cold Creek Basin and never return, to let you win." She kept her voice level. "In exchange, you stop. No more attacks, no more harassment. We leave, you keep the disputed land, everyone moves on." Daniel studied her carefully. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of fighting. Because watching our home burn nearly killed people I care about. Because maybe you're right. Maybe the frontier is just brutal and unfair, and the smart move is to accept that and survive however you can." "You don't believe that?" "No, but I'm willing to pretend I do if it means ending this." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, "Your husband would never agree." "My husband is exhausted, broken. He lost everything his parents built. He's ready to quit, even if he won't admit it." Eliza met Daniel's eyes. "I can convince him. Give us 2 weeks to make arrangements. By spring, we'll be gone. You'll have what you want. And in exchange? You leave us alone. Let us leave in peace. No more attacks." Daniel considered this. "How do I know you won't just take my agreement and then come back with the marshal?" "Because I'm giving you my word. And unlike you, I actually keep mine. The insult hung in the air. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. 2 weeks, he said finally. After that, if you're still here, all bets are off. Understood. Eliza stood and walked to the door. Then she turned back. Just so we're clear, I know you're lying. I know you'll try something before we leave. But I needed to look you in the eye and confirm what kind of man you are. Now I know. And what kind of man am I? The kind who's about to lose everything because he underestimated a school teacher. She left before he could respond. Outside, her hands were shaking worse than his had been. She'd just gambled everything on a bluff, and she had no idea if it would work. But she'd seen what she needed to see in his eyes. Fear, desperation. The look of a man who knew his plan was unraveling and didn't know how to stop it. Now she just had to make sure he unraveled completely before he destroyed them. She rode back to the ranch, where Garrick and the men were living in the equipment shed and the bunkhouse while planning reconstruction. The marshal had left guards posted, but everyone knew they wouldn't stay forever. Garrick met her outside, face etched with worry. Where were you? I was about to send Tate looking, making a deal with the devil, and setting a trap. She dismounted. I need everyone together, including Mrs. Chen. What I'm about to propose is going to sound insane, but I need you to trust me. 20 minutes later, 13 people crowded into the equipment shed, listening to Eliza outline her plan. Daniel thinks we're broken. Thinks we're ready to quit. I just offered him exactly what he wants, us leaving Cold Creek Basin permanently. He agreed to a 2-week truce. And you believe him? Tate asked skeptically. Not even a little. He'll attack before then, probably within days. He can't risk us actually leaving because we might take evidence with us. He needs to finish this while we're vulnerable. Then why make the deal? Garrick asked. Because now he's on a timeline. He has to move fast, which means he'll make mistakes. And because I planted a seed in his mind that we might actually leave, might actually give up, that uncertainty will eat at him, make him paranoid. Eliza looked around at the group. We're going to use that paranoia. We're going to pretend to prepare to leave while actually preparing to defend. And when he attacks, and he will attack, we're going to be ready. We're going to capture him alive, and we're going to make him confess. That's not a plan, one of the ranch hands said. That's suicide with extra steps. Maybe, but it's the only move we have left. The law won't help us. The town won't help us. We're alone in this. So we either run, which means Daniel wins and probably hunts us down anyway, or we fight. One final time. Win or lose. Garrick was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When did you become a tactician? When I realized that surviving isn't enough. We have to win, completely, or we'll never be safe. She met his eyes. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of defending. I want to attack. I want to finish this. Are you with me? For a long moment, Garrick didn't answer. Then he smiled, that rare, genuine smile she'd only seen a handful of times. I'm with you. Always. The others murmured agreement. Even the ones who thought the plan was crazy seemed willing to try. Then here's what we do, Eliza said. Over the next 3 days, they staged an elaborate theater production. Garrick made obvious trips to town, asking about land prices in other territories. The ranch hands were seen packing belongings, looking defeated and resigned. Mrs. Chen loudly complained about having to leave her home, all of it carefully choreographed to reach Daniel's ears and confirm what Eliza had told him. The Hales were preparing to run. But in reality, they were fortifying. The equipment shed was reinforced, weapons were stockpiled, defensive positions were prepared. They were building not a retreat, but a trap. And at the center of it all, Eliza had one more piece to put in place. On the 4th night, she rode to town again, this time to Margaret Fletcher's house, arriving after dark when prying eyes wouldn't see. Fletcher answered the door in her nightgown, looking irritated. Mrs. Hale, it's nearly midnight. I need a favor, a real one. Not a transaction, not a grudging professional obligation, a favor between 2 women who both know what it's like to survive in a place that doesn't value them. Fletcher's expression shifted. What kind of favor? Those sealed documents of Mercer's. I need you to tell me if there's any way to access them without a court order. Any legal loophole, any technicality, anything. I already told you. I know what you told me, but you're smarter than you pretend to be. You've worked in that office for 20 years. You know every rule and every exception, so please, if there's any way, tell me. Because if I can't get to those documents, people are going to die. Maybe me. Maybe my husband. Maybe innocent ranch hands who just wanted honest work." Fletcher stared at her for a long moment. Then she sighed and opened the door wider. "Come in. But if anyone asks, you were never here." Inside Fletcher's small house, surrounded by law books and territorial statutes, the clerk explained the one loophole that existed. If the person who deposited the sealed documents is deceased, and if there's reason to believe the documents contain evidence relevant to that person's death, the territorial prosecutor can request access for investigative purposes. Judge Hamilton would likely grant it if the prosecutor made a compelling case. But the prosecutor would need reason to investigate, and he already decided Garrick was innocent. Unless new evidence emerged suggesting the investigation should be reopened, not to prosecute your husband, but to identify the actual killer. Fletcher pulled out a book. "Here, Territorial Statute 47B. Allows reopening of closed cases if material evidence comes to light." What counts as material evidence? That's up to the prosecutor's discretion. But if you had something, anything, that suggested Daniel Mercer was involved, it might be enough. Eliza thought hard. The filing record showing Daniel witnessed the sealing. Doesn't that establish he knew what was in the documents? It establishes he was present, not necessarily that he knew the contents. What if I could prove he acted on knowledge of those contents, made decisions, committed acts based on what his uncle wrote? Then you might have an argument. Fletcher looked at her. "What are you planning, Mrs. Hale?" "I'm planning to make Daniel Mercer confess. And when he does, I need someone who'll testify that there's legal justification for opening those documents. Will you do that?" "If he actually confesses, you won't need me. You'll have proof. I need backup. I need everything airtight, because this is our one chance." Eliza leaned forward. "You don't like me. I understand that. But you're a woman who believes in rules, in order, in things being done properly. Daniel Mercer killed his uncle and tried to frame an innocent man. That violates every rule you believe in. Help me prove it, please." Fletcher was quiet for a very long time. Then, "If you get a confession, bring it to me immediately. I'll file the paperwork to reopen the investigation and access the sealed documents. But Mrs. Hale, if you're wrong about this, if Daniel is innocent, you'll be the one facing charges. For harassment, for slander, possibly for assault if your confession involves violence. I understand the risk. I hope you do. Because the frontier doesn't forgive women who step outside their place, even when they're right." Eliza rode back to the ranch with her last piece in position. Now all she needed was for Daniel to take the bait. He came on the 6th night. The ranch was quiet, most buildings dark. Only the equipment shed showed light, a single lamp burning, making it look like a few people were still awake, but most had gone to bed. In reality, all 13 defenders were positioned and ready. Garrick in the shed, Tate in the bunkhouse. Ranch hands scattered in strategic positions. Mrs. Chen in the old root cellar with the 2 youngest workers, protected but armed. And Eliza in the shed loft, watching through a gap in the boards. The brass school bell beside her for reasons she still didn't fully understand. They came just after midnight. 8 riders approaching from the south, moving carefully but not carefully enough. One of them was Daniel. Eliza recognized his silhouette. They dismounted 50 yards out and approached on foot, silent, professional. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was assassination. The attackers split into 2 groups. 4 moved toward the equipment shed, 4 toward the bunkhouse. The plan was obvious: simultaneous assault, overwhelming force, kill everyone before they could organize resistance. But Garrick and Tate had anticipated this. As the attackers got within 30 feet, lanterns suddenly blazed to life all around the property, 8 different positions illuminating the kill zone. "Drop your weapons," Garrick's voice rang out. "You're surrounded!" The attackers froze, caught in the open, suddenly visible and vulnerable. For a moment, everything hung in balance. Then Daniel made his mistake. Instead of surrendering, he grabbed for his pistol. Garrick fired first, not to kill, but to disarm. The bullet struck Daniel's gun hand, sending the weapon spinning away. Daniel screamed and dropped to his knees. His men immediately threw down their weapons and raised their hands. They'd been hired guns, not martyrs. Without their leader, they had no reason to die. The ranch hands rushed forward, securing prisoners with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, all 8 attackers were disarmed, bound, and sitting in the snow. Eliza climbed down from the loft. Garrick was already standing over Daniel, who clutched his bleeding hand and glared up with pure hatred. "You can't prove anything," Daniel said through gritted teeth. "This was a property dispute gone wrong. Self-defense." "You attacked us," Garrick said flatly, "with 8 armed men. In the middle of the night. That's not self-defense, that's attempted murder. It's your word against mine." "Actually," Eliza said, stepping into the light, "it's your confession against you." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "I haven't confessed to anything." "Not yet, but you will." She nodded to Tate. "Bring him to the shed. Everyone else, secure the other prisoners. Someone ride for Marshal Cross." Inside the equipment shed, they tied Daniel to a chair. His hand was bandaged but still bleeding. He looked pale but defiant. Garrick stood in front of him, arms crossed. "Start talking. Why kill your uncle? Why frame me? Why all of this?" "I want a lawyer." "You're on a ranch in the middle of nowhere with armed men who just watched you try to kill them. You don't get a lawyer. You get one chance to explain yourself before we hand you to the marshal with enough evidence to hang you 3 times over." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Evidence? You have nothing. I'll claim this was a misunderstanding, that I came to negotiate and you attacked me." "With 8 armed men," Eliza said, "in the middle of the night, while we were supposedly preparing to leave peacefully?" She shook her head. "No one will believe that. They'll believe whatever I pay them to believe." "Will they believe your uncle's sealed documents?" The question came quietly, but it hit like a hammer. Daniel's face went white. "You can't access those." "Can't we?" "Because you witnessed their filing, which means you know what's in them, and your actions since your uncle's death suggest you're desperately afraid of them being opened." Eliza pulled out the brass school bell. "Want to know why I brought this? Because it represents everything you tried to destroy. Order, civilization, the idea that we can build something better than frontier brutality. It's just a bell. It's a symbol, and symbols matter. They remind us who we want to be instead of what survival forces us to become." She set it on the table between them. "Your uncle wrote something down, something worth killing for. Tell us what it was, and maybe we can convince the marshal to argue for life imprisonment instead of hanging." "I'm not confessing to anything." "Then we'll open the documents without you and let them speak for themselves." "You don't have the authority." "We will by morning. Margaret Fletcher is filing the paperwork right now. The prosecutor will request access based on new evidence, specifically your attack tonight. And once those documents are open, whatever secrets they contain become public record." Eliza leaned closer. "The only question is whether you confess now and have some control over the narrative, or stay silent and let your uncle's words condemn you." Daniel stared at her with pure loathing, but beneath it, she could see calculation. He was weighing his options, trying to find an angle. Finally, he spoke. "My uncle was a monster. You didn't know him like I did. He built his empire on theft, murder, and intimidation, including killing James Hale." Garrick went very still. "He admitted it? He bragged about it. Told me the whole story one night when he was drunk. How he'd arranged the accident, how easy it was, how satisfying it felt to destroy a rival and steal his land piece by piece." Daniel's voice was hollow. "He wrote it all down, every crime, every victim, said it was insurance. If anyone came after him, he'd release the documents and take down half the powerful men in the territory with him." "So you killed him to prevent that?" "I killed him because he was going to confess. He was dying. Cancer, the doctor said. Had maybe 6 months. And he decided he wanted to clear his conscience before the end. Was planning to give those documents to the marshal, confess everything, and let the consequences fall where they would." Daniel laughed bitterly. 30 years of crimes. He'd have destroyed everyone, including me. I'd helped him with some of it, you see. Following orders, I thought. Didn't realize I was making myself complicit in murder until it was too late." "So you killed him first." "I saved myself. And yes, I framed Garrick Hale because it was convenient. 2 birds with 1 stone, silence my uncle and destroy his last enemy. It should have worked." Daniel looked at Eliza. "But you ruined it. Couldn't just accept things. Couldn't just survive and move on. You had to fight." "Because fighting is better than accepting injustice." "Is it? Look around. Your home is burned. Your husband nearly hanged. People died defending your stubborn pride. Was it worth it? Eliza met his eyes. Yes, because we're still here, still fighting, still building. You tried to destroy us and failed. That's worth everything. Outside, they heard horses approaching. The marshal finally arriving. Garrick looked at Eliza. We got the confession. It's over. Not quite. She turned to Daniel. Those documents. What else is in them? Names, dates, crimes. Enough to destroy a dozen powerful men. Enough to rewrite the history of this territory. His smile was twisted. My uncle's final revenge. Even in death, he burns down everything he touched. Marshal Cross entered with 4 deputies. He took one look at the scene, Daniel bound and bleeding, 8 prisoners secured outside, the ranch defenders armed and alert, and sighed. Someone want to explain this? Garrick did, concisely and clearly. The attack, the confession, the sealed documents. Cross listened with growing concern. When Garrick finished, the marshal looked at Daniel. Any of that true? I want a lawyer, Daniel said flatly. That's as good as a confession out here. Cross gestured to his deputies. Take him into custody. Murder charges for Silas Mercer. Attempted murder for the attack tonight. We'll sort the rest out at trial. As they led Daniel away, he looked back at Eliza. You think you've won, but when those documents open, when all those names come out, you'll wish you'd let sleeping crime stay buried. My uncle didn't just destroy his enemies, he owned his friends, and you're about to make powerful people very angry. Then they'll learn the same lesson you did, Eliza said, that some people can't be intimidated, can't be bought, can't be broken. After they were gone, the ranch fell quiet. 13 exhausted defenders, 2 burned buildings, a future still uncertain, but alive, still standing. Garrick found Eliza sitting on the equipment shed steps, watching the sun rise over the prairie. He sat beside her silently. We did it, he said finally. Did we? Daniel's arrested, but his warning was real. Those documents are going to cause problems. Let them. We'll handle whatever comes. He took her hand. My father spent his whole life chasing revenge for crimes he suspected but couldn't prove. It ate him alive. I was heading down that same path until you showed me something different. What's that? That building matters more than destroying. That moving forward matters more than looking back. That sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting, it's choosing to live instead of just survive. Eliza leaned against him, suddenly aware of how bone-tired she was. We need to rebuild. The house, the barn, everything. We will. Different this time. Better. With both our initials carved somewhere prominent, like I promised. And when winter really hits, when supplies run low and everyone's packed into inadequate shelter, then we'll survive it together, like we've survived everything else. He paused. I love you. Should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now. I love you for your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to quit even when quitting would be easier. You saved me, saved this ranch, saved everything. Eliza felt tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally break free. I love you too. Didn't expect to. Married you for practical reasons and fell in love anyway. I don't know if that makes me smart or stupid. Makes you human, makes us both human. He kissed her forehead. We're going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. The sealed documents were opened 3 weeks later. Margaret Fletcher filed the paperwork. The prosecutor reviewed them. And Daniel had been right. They contained enough criminal evidence to shake the entire territorial government. Names were named, crimes detailed, 20 years of corruption exposed in Silas Mercer's meticulous handwriting. Some powerful men fell, others fled. The territory spent months sorting through the mess, prosecuting crimes, redistributing stolen property. The Hale Ranch got back the disputed land. It had been stolen from James Hale years ago, then covered up through fraud. Garrick's father had been murdered, exactly as suspected. But instead of revenge, Garrick chose something different. He donated the disputed land to the town for a new school, a permanent building where children could learn year-round, staffed by properly paid teachers. And he asked Eliza to oversee its construction and serve as its first headmistress. She agreed. By spring, 2 buildings rose on the Hale Ranch where burned ruins had been. A house, larger than before, with strong walls and a brass bell mounted by the front door, and a new barn, with 2 sets of initials carved into the main beam, GH and EH. The school opened that autumn. 27 students the first year. Eliza taught them reading and arithmetic while Garrick ran the ranch. Mrs. Chen managed both households with cheerful efficiency. Tate trained new ranch hands and told stories about the winter, everything burned and everyone survived. Daniel Mercer was hanged for murder the following spring. He went to the gallows, cursing Eliza's name, which she took as confirmation she'd done the right thing. And on a cold morning in late November, Eliza stood in front of her classroom, hand resting on the child growing in her belly, and rang the brass school bell to start the day. The sound carried across the valley, clear, strong, persistent. A symbol of everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for, everything they'd refused to let the frontier destroy. Outside, snow was starting to fall. Winter was coming again, but this time the Hale Ranch was ready. Strong. Fortified not with weapons, but with community, with purpose, with the kind of stubborn hope that turned survival into something worth living for. Garrick appeared in the classroom doorway, covered in dust from morning ranch work. He'd come to walk her home for lunch, a routine they'd established. The children giggled. Eliza smiled. "Class dismissed until after lunch," she said. "Read chapters 4 and 5. I'll quiz you when you return." The students scattered. Eliza and Garrick walked together across the property that had nearly killed them, that they'd fought to keep, that now felt like home in ways Cold Creek Basin never had. "You look tired," Garrick said. "I'm growing a human. Tired comes with the territory." "You should rest more." "I'll rest when I'm dead. Until then, I have too much to do." But she squeezed his hand. "Thank you for building the school, for supporting this, for understanding it matters. Education always mattered. I just forgot for a while." He looked at the brass bell mounted by their house. That bell still seems like a strange thing to have saved from a burning building. It was instinct. In that moment, it represented everything I didn't want to lose. Order, civilization, hope. She paused. Turns out instinct knew what it was doing. They ate lunch with Mrs. Chen, who'd made dumplings and was already planning for the baby's arrival with an enthusiasm that bordered on terrifying. Discussed ranch business, school enrollment, the territorial investigation that was still uncovering crimes. Normal life, built on the ashes of everything they'd lost and everything they'd fought to keep. That evening, after the students had gone home and the ranch had settled into quiet, Eliza sat in their reading room with a book while Garrick worked on ranch accounts nearby. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Marrying me? Everything that came after?" Garrick looked up. "Do you?" I asked first. "No, not for a second. You're the best decision I ever made, practical reasons or otherwise." He set down his pen. "Why do you ask?" "Because we lost so much. Your parents' house. Years of your life spent building something that nearly got destroyed. You could have had a quiet life if you'd married someone else. Quiet isn't the same as good, and I don't want quiet. I want this. Messy, complicated, difficult, real." He came over and knelt beside her chair. "You took a practical marriage contract and turned it into something worth fighting for. That's not a regret. That's a gift." Eliza touched his face. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? We're going to be better than okay. We're going to build something that lasts, something our children inherit and build upon, something that proves the frontier doesn't always win." Outside, the first winter storm of the season was building. Wind tested the walls, snow began falling in earnest, the kind of weather that killed people who weren't prepared, who weren't strong enough, who didn't have shelter and supplies and stubborn determination. But inside the Hale Ranch house, warmth and light held steady. And in the years that followed, people would tell stories about the winter. Everything burned and everyone should have died. About the school teacher who fought like a soldier and the rancher who chose building over revenge. About the brass bell that survived fire and became a symbol of something larger than itself. They'd tell those stories to children learning their letters in a permanent school building, to travelers passing through a territory slowly becoming civilized, to anyone who needed reminded that survival wasn't enough. You had to fight for something better. Eliza Hale taught for 37 more years, raised 4 children who all learned to read before they could properly ride, helped Garrick build the Hale Ranch into one of the most successful operations in 3 territories. outlived 2 wars, 1 plague, and countless frontier hardships. And every morning until the day she died, she rang that brass school bell to start the day. Its sound carried across the valley like a promise kept, like proof that sometimes, against all odds and all enemies and all the brutal logic of frontier survival, stubborn hope and fierce determination could build something worth having. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, lasting, theirs. And in the end, that was enough.